Father throws daughter into the sea to vanish. A millionaire saves her. When she says 3 words, he turns pale. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. Now sit back and enjoy the journey. The storm howled across the dark expanse of the Atlantic, with waves crashing like giants locked in battle. The cold spray of seawater stung her skin as the wind tore through her hair. Emma Evans clung to the side of the boat, her small hands trembling as tears streamed down her face. "Please," she begged, her voice barely audible over the thunder and crashing waves. "Daddy, don't do this." Her father, Richard Evans, stood before her, face rigid, eyes colder than the sea below. He didn't flinch at her cries. The man who had once tucked her into bed, read her bedtime stories, and kissed her goodnight was gone. In his place stood someone ruthless, calculating. "This is the only way," he muttered, more to himself than to her. His fingers tightened around her fragile arm. "You know too much, Emma." The words stabbed her like a knife. She knew about his shady business deals, the offshore accounts, the people who had mysteriously disappeared after crossing him. She had overheard a phone call and confronted him, not realizing how deep she was digging her own grave. The boat rocked violently, and Emma slipped, her knees hitting the wet deck hard. Richard towered over her, his shadow blending into the night. "Daddy, please," she whispered one last time, her voice hoarse and broken. His jaw clenched. For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes. Remorse, perhaps, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Without hesitation, he yanked her to her feet, dragged her to the edge of the boat, and shoved her overboard. The icy water enveloped her instantly, dragging her down like an anchor. She kicked and fought, her lungs burning as salt water filled her mouth. Above her, the roar of the storm drowned out everything else. The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her was the silhouette of the boat disappearing into the distance. She stopped fighting. Her body grew limp, surrendering to the sea's icy grip. Then a light. "Captain, over there!" Ethan Bennett leaned over the side of his luxury yacht, squinting through the sheets of rain. His crew had spotted something, or someone, in the water. "Lower the lifeboat now!" he barked, adrenaline surging through his veins. The crew obeyed, working quickly to fight against the wind and waves. Ethan descended into the lifeboat, his eyes fixed on the small figure floating lifelessly among the waves. His mind raced. What was a child doing out here in the middle of a storm? As the lifeboat neared her, Ethan jumped in, the freezing water seeping into his clothes. He reached for her, his strong arms pulling her fragile body from the sea's grasp. She was limp in his arms, her lips blue, her face pale. "Come on, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Stay with me." They hoisted her back onto the yacht, where one of the crew members wrapped her in a thermal blanket. Ethan crouched beside her, his hands shaking as he pressed his fingers to her neck. A pulse, weak but there. Relief washed over him. "Call the doctor to meet us at the dock," Ethan instructed, his gaze never leaving the girl. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, and for a second, she looked up at him, confused and terrified. "Help me," she murmured before slipping back into unconsciousness. Ethan's jaw tightened. Whoever had left this girl to die was going to pay. By the time they reached the dock, the storm had calmed, but the tension in Ethan's chest hadn't eased. The ambulance was waiting, and as they carried the girl away, Ethan followed, unwilling to let her out of his sight. At the hospital, the doctors worked quickly, warming her body and checking for injuries. Hours passed, and Ethan sat in the waiting room, soaked to the bone and replaying the night's events in his mind. Who was she? What had happened to her? He needed answers. The doctor finally approached, pulling off his gloves. "She's stable," he said. "Just hypothermia and exhaustion. No serious injuries." Ethan nodded, relief flooding his veins. "Can I see her?" The doctor hesitated. "She's asleep, but yes, just be gentle." Ethan entered the room quietly, his gaze softening as he saw her lying there. Her tiny frame buried under layers of blankets. Her blonde hair, damp and tangled, clung to her face. She looked so fragile, yet there was something about her that seemed unbreakable. He pulled a chair closer and sat down, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. His thoughts drifted to his own daughter, Megan, who was back home battling a rare heart condition. She was the reason he had taken a step back from his corporate empire, to be there for her. But now, fate had placed another child in his care. A soft murmur escaped the girl's lips, drawing him back to the present. She stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. When her eyes met his, she flinched, shrinking back into the pillow. "It's okay," Ethan said gently. "You're safe now." Her lips trembled as tears welled in her eyes. He tried to kill me," she whispered, her voice cracking. Ethan's breath hitched. He leaned forward, his voice steady but full of emotion. Who tried to hurt you?" She hesitated, her fingers clutching the blanket like a lifeline. "My father." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. "Why would he do that?" Ethan asked softly, his mind racing. Emma shook her head, her tears falling freely now. "Because I saw something I wasn't supposed to see." Ethan reached out, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "Listen to me," he said, his tone firm. "You're safe now. No one is going to hurt you again, I promise." Her sobs quieted, and for the first time that night, she let herself believe him. But as Ethan left the room, a storm of his own brewed within him. He knew this wasn't the end of Emma's nightmare. Her father was still out there, and if what she said was true, the man wouldn't stop until she was gone for good. Ethan couldn't allow that to happen. With one last glance at the sleeping girl, Ethan made a silent vow. Whoever had done this would pay. The sleek black car sped along the winding coastal road, its headlights slicing through the misty morning fog. Ethan sat silently in the back seat, his gaze fixed on the blurred horizon. Beside him, Emma stared out the window, her fingers tracing small circles on the cold glass. She hadn't said much since they left the hospital, but Ethan could feel her unease. He didn't push her to talk. He knew the silence was her armor, and right now she needed it. "We'll be there soon," Ethan said softly. Emma gave a small nod but didn't turn to look at him. The salt-scented breeze from the ocean seemed to match the heaviness in the air between them. As they rounded the final bend, the house came into view, a sprawling mansion perched on a cliff, its gray stone exterior blending with the rocky landscape. The waves crashed against the cliffs below, their roar a constant backdrop to the isolation of the estate. To many it might have looked like paradise, but to Emma it felt like another cage. The car rolled to a stop in front of the entrance where a gravel path led to an ornate wooden door. Anne, the house's head of staff, stood waiting, her arms crossed over her chest. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she noticed Emma stepping out of the car. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," Anne greeted, her tone polite but guarded. She nodded toward Emma. "I wasn't aware we'd be having guests." Ethan exhaled sharply. "This is Emma. She's staying with us for a while." Anne's gaze shifted to Emma, taking in her small frame, messy hair, and guarded expression. The girl looked like a stray cat, unsure if it could trust the hand that offered food. "Does your daughter know?" Anne asked, lowering her voice as she followed Ethan into the house. "I'll explain everything to Megan," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "For now, make sure Emma has a warm room, food, and clothes. She's been through enough." Anne didn't argue, but her lips pressed into a thin line. "Of course." Inside, the warmth of the house contrasted with the cold morning outside. The grand foyer was filled with antique furniture, paintings of seascapes, and the faint scent of freshly brewed coffee. Emma hesitated near the doorway, her feet glued to the floor as she took in her surroundings. "Come on," Ethan said gently, gesturing for her to follow him. As they made their way down the corridor, the sound of soft music floated from a nearby room. Ethan smiled faintly. Megan. She always played music in the mornings to lift her spirits. He opened the door to the sitting room, where Megan lay on a plush chaise lounge, her fingers lazily tapping the keys of a small electric piano. Her hair, a soft shade of auburn, cascaded over her shoulders, and although her cheeks were pale, her eyes lit up when she saw her father. "Dad!" she exclaimed, sitting up straighter. but her excitement faded when she noticed Emma standing behind him. "Who's that?" Ethan stepped aside, revealing the girl fully. "This is Emma. She's going to stay with us for a little while." Megan tilted her head, her curiosity evident. "Hi, Emma. I'm Megan." Emma's lips twitched as if she were about to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she shifted uncomfortably and looked down at her shoes. "Megan, why don't you show Emma around while I talk to Anne?" Ethan suggested. Megan's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Sure, come on, I'll show you the best spots." Emma hesitated, but the warmth in Megan's voice was hard to resist. She followed Megan out of the room, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. Megan led Emma through the maze of corridors, chatting as if they'd known each other forever. "That's the library," she said, pointing to a set of mahogany doors. "Dad has 1,000,000 books in there, but I think half of them are just for show." Emma managed a small smile, but her mind was elsewhere. The vastness of the house, the kindness of these strangers, it all felt overwhelming, like she was walking through someone else's dream. "And this is my room," Megan said, opening a door painted a soft shade of lavender. Inside, the walls were decorated with posters of classic movies, and fairy lights twinkled around the window. Emma stepped inside cautiously, her fingers brushing against a collection of Polaroid photos strung along the wall. One picture caught her attention, a photo of Megan and Ethan on a beach, their faces lit up with laughter. It was the kind of happiness Emma had once known, before everything fell apart. "You can sit," Megan said, patting the bed. Emma sat down, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "Are you okay?" Megan asked, her voice softer now. Emma looked up, and for a moment she considered telling Megan everything: the boat, the betrayal, the terror of the ocean pulling her under. But the words lodged in her throat like stones. Instead, she simply said, "I'm tired." Megan nodded, understanding more than Emma expected. "You can rest here if you want." Emma lay down, her body sinking into the soft mattress. The warmth and safety of the room lulled her into a drowsy state. But just as she was about to drift off, Megan whispered something that made her heart tighten. "I'm glad you're here." Downstairs, Ethan paced the kitchen, his mind racing. Anne entered, setting down a tray of coffee. "I assume you'll tell me what's going on eventually," she said, pouring him a cup. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. She was thrown into the ocean by her own father. Anne's eyes widened, the coffee cup pausing midway to her lips. Good Lord, who would do such a thing? "A man who wanted her gone," Ethan replied bitterly. "She saw something that put her life in danger." Anne set the cup down, her fingers tightening around the handle. "Do you know who he is?" "Not yet," Ethan admitted. "But I will, and when I do, he'll regret ever laying a hand on her." Anne studied him for a moment before nodding. "I'll make sure she's taken care of. But Ethan, you know this could bring trouble to your doorstep." "I'm not afraid of trouble," Ethan said firmly. "I'm afraid of what will happen to her if I don't protect her." Anne sighed. "Just be careful. You have Megan to think about too." Ethan's chest tightened. He knew that. His daughter was his world, but now Emma had become part of that world too, and he wasn't going to let her slip through the cracks. As he stared out the kitchen window at the storm clouds fading into the distance, he made a silent vow. Whoever Emma's father was, he'd make sure the man paid for what he'd done, and he'd start by finding out exactly who he was dealing with. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the cliffs drenched and the ocean below calmer. But the storm hadn't truly passed for Emma. As she lay in bed, the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks beneath the mansion sent tremors through her chest. She clutched the blanket tighter, as if the fabric could shield her from the memories that haunted her. The cold water, her father's eyes, devoid of any warmth. The last thing she heard before hitting the water was his voice, calm and final. "Goodbye, Emma." She squeezed her eyes shut, willing the memory to fade. But it didn't. It never did. A soft knock on the door startled her. She sat up quickly, brushing away tears. "Come in." The door creaked open, and Ethan stepped inside, holding a tray with a steaming bowl of soup, crackers, and a glass of milk. He placed it on the nightstand, his gaze warm but observant. "I figured you might be hungry." Emma shook her head. "I'm fine." Ethan didn't move. He pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. "You don't have to eat if you don't want to," he said gently. "But I'm here if you need anything." The room fell silent except for the muffled hum of the ocean. Emma studied him, her defenses still up but weakening. He didn't push her, didn't interrogate her. He just sat there, as if his presence was enough. Finally, she broke the silence. "Why are you helping me?" Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "That's reason enough for me." Emma looked away, her fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. Most people wouldn't. Most people would look the other way. "I'm not most people," Ethan replied. "And you don't have to tell me what happened until you're ready. But when you are, I'll be here." Her eyes flickered with something between gratitude and fear. "What if telling you makes things worse?" Ethan's expression softened. "Then we'll face it together." For a moment, Emma considered his words, but the weight of her secrets was too much. She wasn't ready to let him in. "Not yet." "I'm tired," she whispered, a polite dismissal. Ethan nodded, understanding. He stood, his movements slow and deliberate, as if not to scare her. "I'll check on you later." He paused at the door, glancing back. "And if you change your mind about the soup, it'll be right here." When he left, Emma exhaled a shaky breath. She reached for the bowl and took a small sip, the warmth spreading through her chest. But no amount of warmth could thaw the ice that had taken root inside her. The next morning, the mansion was unusually quiet. Megan, still recovering from a restless night, stayed in her room, and Anne was busy in the kitchen. Emma wandered the hallways, the sunlight filtering through the large windows and casting golden patterns on the wooden floor. The mansion felt like a labyrinth, each corridor leading to another mystery. She turned a corner and found herself standing before a grand staircase that spiraled downward. At the bottom was a room with double doors slightly ajar. Curiosity pulled her forward. The room was a study, its walls lined with shelves of leather-bound books. A large desk sat in the center, cluttered with papers, a globe, and a framed photograph of Ethan and Megan. Emma traced her finger along the edge of the desk, her gaze landing on a small notebook partially hidden under a stack of documents. She hesitated, then opened it. The pages were filled with notes, dates, and names, things she didn't understand. But one name stood out: Richard Evans. Her breath hitched, and her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Before she could read further, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. She quickly closed the notebook and backed away from the desk just as Ethan entered the room. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, noticing her. Emma nodded, forcing a casual tone. "Just exploring." Ethan smiled. "This is my study. Not the most exciting room, but it's where I get most of my work done." He walked over to the desk and began organizing the papers, unaware of what she had just seen. "Do you work a lot?" Emma asked, hoping to steer the conversation away from the notebook. "Not as much as I used to," he admitted. "I stepped back from my company when Megan got sick. She needed me more than the business did." Emma's chest tightened at the mention of Megan's illness. "Will she be okay?" Ethan paused, his hands resting on the desk. "I hope so. The doctors are doing everything they can, but it's a waiting game." His voice wavered slightly, but he quickly composed himself. "Megan's a fighter, though, just like you." Emma's eyes darted to the floor. "I'm not a fighter." "Yes, you are," Ethan said firmly. "You survived something most people wouldn't. That makes you stronger than you think." Emma didn't respond. Her mind was still racing, replaying the sight of her father's name in the notebook. Why was Ethan investigating him? Did he already know who she was? "I should go check on Megan," she mumbled, excusing herself. Ethan watched her leave, a flicker of concern crossing his face. He could see the battle she was fighting within herself, but he knew better than to push. He would give her time. Emma made her way back to her room. But instead of resting, she paced the floor, her thoughts spiraling. She couldn't ignore what she had seen in Ethan's study. If he was looking into her father, it meant he was involved in something bigger than just helping her. Was he planning to turn her in? Her heart raced. She couldn't let that happen. She had to protect herself. Without wasting another second, she grabbed the small bag she had brought from the hospital and stuffed a few belongings inside. Her plan was simple: sneak out before anyone noticed and disappear. She had done it before. She could do it again. As she slipped on her shoes and crept toward the door, a soft knock startled her. "Emma?" Megan's voice was muffled on the other side. "Can I come in?" Emma froze, her hand hovering over the doorknob. After a moment, she opened the door just enough to see Megan's concerned face. "I wanted to show you something," Megan said, holding up a scrapbook. "It's pictures of my favorite places in the house. I thought it might help you feel more at home." Emma's eyes softened. Megan's kindness was disarming. Slowly, she opened the door wider and let Megan inside. They sat on the bed, flipping through the scrapbook together. Megan pointed out photos of the garden, the beach nearby, and the secret room behind the library where she and Ethan used to play hide and seek. For a moment, Emma allowed herself to forget the weight of her secrets. But as the pages turned, she knew that forgetting wouldn't last. She was still in danger, and if she stayed, she could put everyone here at risk, including Megan. When Megan finally left the room, Emma returned to her bag. Her resolve hardened. She needed to leave before it was too late. She opened the door quietly, the hallway dimly lit by the fading evening light. Her footsteps were soft as she made her way to the back entrance. But just as she reached for the doorknob, a voice stopped her. "Going somewhere?" She turned sharply and saw Ethan standing behind her, arms crossed, his expression a mix of concern and disappointment. Emma's pulse quickened. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "We need to talk," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. Emma's escape plan had failed, and she knew there was no running now. The door clicked shut behind them as Ethan led Emma back to the sitting room. The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting flickering shadows along the walls, but the warmth did little to comfort her. She sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ethan pulled up a chair across from her, his gaze steady but gentle. "Why were you trying to leave?" he asked, breaking the silence. Emma stared at the floor, avoiding his eyes. She didn't want to admit the truth, not to him, not to anyone. "I don't belong here," she whispered. "I'm just going to cause trouble." "That's not true," Ethan replied, leaning forward. "You've been through something terrible and you're scared. I understand that, but running away isn't the answer." Her throat tightened. "You don't understand. If I stay, bad things will happen. My father won't stop until—" She cut herself off, realizing she had said too much. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his concern deepening. "Your father," he repeated. "Emma, I need you to trust me. Tell me what happened that night." She shook her head violently, her fingers gripping the fabric of her jeans. "I can't. If I tell you, you'll hate me too." Ethan moved to the couch and sat beside her, careful to give her space. "I'm not going to hate you, I promise." For a moment, the room was silent except for the soft crackle of the fire. Then, Emma exhaled shakily. "He tried to kill me," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said I knew too much about his business and he couldn't risk me talking to anyone. So he took me out on the boat during the storm and threw me overboard." Ethan's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. The thought of a man doing that to his own daughter made his blood boil. "Emma," he said softly, "I'm so sorry." She wiped her eyes quickly as if embarrassed by her tears. "It doesn't matter. I survived, but he'll come looking for me. He won't stop until I'm gone for good." Ethan's mind raced. He had suspected there was more to Emma's story, but hearing it confirmed only strengthened his resolve. "You're safe here," he assured her. "I won't let him get anywhere near you," Emma sniffled, her voice barely audible. "You don't know what he's capable of." "I don't care what he's capable of," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "He doesn't scare me." For the first time, Emma looked directly at him. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because no one protected you when they should have. And I know what it's like to feel like the world has turned its back on you. But you're not alone anymore." A tear slid down her cheek, but this time, she didn't wipe it away. The weight of his words settled in her chest, stirring something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the large windows of the mansion, casting a golden glow over the polished floors. In the kitchen, Anne was preparing breakfast when Ethan walked in, looking more determined than ever. "Morning," she greeted, handing him a cup of coffee. "Rough night?" "You could say that," Ethan muttered. Taking a sip, he leaned against the counter, his mind already racing with plans. Anne studied him for a moment, sensing his tension. "Something's on your mind." "I need you to watch over Megan and Emma today," Ethan said. "I have some business to take care of." Anne raised an eyebrow. "What kind of business?" "The kind that ensures Emma's father never comes near her again." Anne's expression darkened. "Ethan, if you're thinking of confronting him, I'm not doing anything reckless," he assured her. "But I need to understand who we're dealing with, and if he's as dangerous as Emma says, I'm going to be ready." Anne sighed, but she didn't argue. "Just be careful. Megan needs you." Ethan nodded, finishing his coffee. "I will be." Emma spent most of the morning in the garden with Megan. The two girls sat on a blanket under a large oak tree, the sound of birds chirping filling the air. Megan had brought out a deck of cards and was teaching Emma how to play an old game her father had taught her when she was younger. "You're getting better," Megan said, smiling as Emma laid down a winning hand. Emma shrugged, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Beginner's luck." Megan tilted her head, studying her friend. "You seem a little less tense today. Did my dad say something to help?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. "He said he'd protect me. It's hard to believe someone would do that for me." "Well, you better believe it," Megan said confidently. "My dad keeps his promises." Emma's gaze softened. "You're lucky to have him." Megan leaned back against the tree, her eyes gazing up at the sky. "He wasn't always around. You know, before I got sick, he was busy all the time. Meetings, business trips. But when the doctors said my condition was serious, he dropped everything. It's like he became a different person overnight." Emma absorbed her words, wondering what it must feel like to have someone prioritize you above everything else. "He really loves you." Megan smiled faintly. "Yeah, he does." She reached for Emma's hand and squeezed it gently. "And I think he cares about you too." Emma's throat tightened, but she nodded. "I'm starting to see that." Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his study, poring over documents and files that his private investigator had sent him. The name Richard Evans appeared repeatedly, linked to fraudulent businesses, offshore accounts, and mysterious disappearances. But one detail stood out above the rest: a recent report that Emma had been missing for 3 days, and her father hadn't reported it to the police. Instead, he had filed a statement claiming that his daughter had run away after an argument. Ethan clenched his fists. "Liar," he muttered under his breath. He knew exactly what kind of man Richard Evans was. His phone buzzed on the desk, and he answered it without looking at the caller ID. "What do you have for me?" The voice on the other end was grim. "It's worse than we thought. Evans has ties to people who clean up messes, permanently. If he finds out where Emma is, he won't hesitate to act." Ethan's grip tightened around the phone. "Then we can't give him that chance. Keep digging. I want to know everything." When he hung up, his mind was already racing with possibilities. He needed a plan. Something that would keep Emma safe and put her father out of the picture for good. But as much as he wanted to shield her from danger, he couldn't ignore the sinking feeling that time was running out. He glanced at the photograph on his desk, the one of him and Megan on the beach. His family had already been through enough. He wasn't about to lose another child. No matter what it took, he would protect Emma. And if that meant going head-to-head with Richard Evans, so be it. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the mansion, stretching across the garden where Emma and Megan sat on the grass. They were laughing over a joke Megan had told, their voices carrying in the breeze. For a brief moment, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: normalcy. But peace was a fragile thing. Inside the house, Ethan stood by the window, watching them from a distance. His mind was a tangle of thoughts, each one more urgent than the last. The investigator's warning echoed in his head. Evans won't hesitate to act. He had no doubt that Emma's father was already looking for her. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Anne entered, her expression grim. "There's someone at the gate," she said. "A man. He's asking about you." Ethan's pulse quickened. Did he say who he was? No. But he's wearing a suit and driving a black car. He doesn't look like someone who's here to sell magazines. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Keep Emma and Megan inside. Don't let them near the windows." Anne nodded and left the room quickly. Ethan grabbed his phone and headed toward the gate. His heart pounded with each step. But his face remained calm. Whoever this man was, he wasn't going to show fear. The black car idled just beyond the wrought iron gate. A man in his mid-40s stepped out, his posture stiff and formal. His hair was neatly combed, and a pair of dark sunglasses concealed his eyes. "Mr. Bennett," the man greeted. His voice smooth but cold. "I'm Michael Graves. I represent Richard Evans." Ethan's expression didn't waver. "You have no business here." "I'm afraid I do," Michael replied, slipping off his sunglasses. His eyes were calculating like a predator sizing up its prey. "Mr. Evans is concerned about his daughter. She's been missing, and he believes you might have information on her whereabouts." Ethan folded his arms. If he's so concerned, why didn't he report her missing to the police? Michael's lips curved into a thin smile. "Mr. Evans prefers to handle family matters privately." "I bet he does," Ethan muttered. He stepped closer to the gate, his voice low and dangerous. "Let me be clear. Emma is under my protection. If Evans tries to come near her, he won't just have me to deal with. He'll have the law." Michael's gaze hardened. "You think you can protect her from him?" Ethan leaned in, his voice steady. "Watch me." For a moment, neither man moved, the tension between them crackling like static electricity. Finally, Michael stepped back toward the car. "Give my regards to Miss Evans," he said before getting into the vehicle. The car reversed slowly down the driveway, disappearing around the bend. Ethan watched until the taillights vanished, then turned and made his way back to the house. His mind was spinning, but one thing was clear. Evans knew Emma was here. Time was running out. In the kitchen, Anne stood at the counter chopping vegetables when Ethan walked in. She set the knife down and wiped her hands on a towel. "How bad is it?" "Worse than we thought," Ethan replied, pouring himself a glass of water. "Evans sent someone to sniff around. He's already closing in." Anne frowned. "What are we going to do?" "We stay one step ahead of him," Ethan said firmly. "I'll call the investigator and have him track Evans' movements. If he tries anything, we'll know." Anne hesitated, then placed a hand on Ethan's arm. "You can't do this alone, Ethan. If this man is as dangerous as you say, you need backup." "I have you," Ethan said with a small smile. "And I have Emma and Megan to fight for. That's all the backup I need." Anne shook her head but didn't argue. She knew Ethan too well. Once he made up his mind, there was no changing it. Upstairs, Emma paced the length of her room, her mind racing. Something was wrong. She could feel it. She had seen the tension in Ethan's eyes earlier, and Anne had been unusually quiet during lunch. Whatever was happening, it involved her. She opened the door and crept down the hallway, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. As she passed Ethan's study, she heard voices inside. She pressed her ear to the door. "Evans won't stop until he gets her," Ethan was saying. "We need to be ready for anything." Anne's voice was softer but equally serious. "And if he finds her?" Ethan paused. "Then we'll make sure he regrets it." Emma backed away from the door, her heart pounding. She knew she couldn't let Ethan fight this battle alone. Her father was a monster, and he wouldn't stop until she was out of the picture permanently. But running away wasn't the solution either. She needed to confront her past. That evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Emma found herself standing on the mansion's balcony, overlooking the ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks below, their rhythmic sound strangely soothing. Footsteps approached behind her and she turned to see Megan. "Hey," Megan said, joining her at the railing. "You've been quiet today." "Just thinking," Emma replied. Megan smiled gently. "About what?" Emma hesitated. "About what I should do. I don't want anyone getting hurt because of me." Megan reached over and took her hand. "You're not alone, Emma. My dad's strong. He'll protect you." Emma blinked back tears. "What if it's not enough?" "Then we'll protect each other," Megan said firmly. "That's what family does." Family. The word hit Emma like a wave. She had lost her family the moment her father betrayed her, but maybe, just maybe, she was finding a new one here. "Thanks, Megan," she whispered. "Anytime." As they stood there in the fading light, Emma made a silent promise to herself. She wasn't going to run anymore. If her father wanted to come for her, he'd have to face the truth, and the people willing to stand by her side. Later that night, Ethan sat in his study, the room dimly lit by the glow of a desk lamp. His phone buzzed and he answered it quickly. "We've located Evans," the investigator said. "He's in the city, but he's meeting with someone tonight, a man with known ties to organized crime." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "Keep an eye on him. If he makes a move, I want to know." As he ended the call, a sense of urgency washed over him. Evans wasn't just a threat. He was a ticking time bomb, and Ethan had no intention of waiting for him to strike first. He leaned back in his chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Tomorrow he would make his move. But tonight, he had one more thing to do. He left the study and made his way to Emma's room. She was sitting by the window, staring out at the dark ocean. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. Emma nodded. Ethan sat down beside her, his gaze following hers toward the horizon. "I know you're scared," he said. "But you don't have to face this alone." "I know," she whispered. "But I don't want anyone to get hurt because of me." "No one's getting hurt," Ethan promised. "Not if I can help it." Emma turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. "Then let me help. I know my father better than anyone if we're going to stop him. I need to be part of the plan." Ethan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Okay," he said. "We'll do this together." And for the first time, Emma felt like she wasn't running anymore. She was ready to fight. The morning sun bathed the mansion in soft golden light, but inside a storm was brewing. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in his hands as he reviewed the latest report from his investigator. Across from him, Anne quietly set down a plate of toast and eggs, her gaze lingering on the dark circles under his eyes. "You didn't sleep," she said, more of a statement than a question. "Couldn't," Ethan admitted, taking a sip of coffee. "Evans is moving faster than I expected." He tapped the report with his fingers, frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. "He met with someone last night, probably discussing how to find her." Anne sat down across from him. "And what's your plan?" Ethan exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "We stay ahead of him. I have people keeping an eye on his movements, but if he gets any closer, we may have to consider relocating Emma." Anne's lips pressed into a thin line. "You think running is the answer?" "No," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "But I'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe." A soft voice interrupted them. "I don't want to run." They turned to see Emma standing in the doorway, her hair slightly tousled from sleep. She stepped into the kitchen, her bare feet making soft padding sounds against the floor. "If we run, he'll just find us again. He always does." Ethan motioned for her to sit. "We're not running yet," he said gently. "But we need to be prepared for anything." Emma sat down and stared at her hands. "I spent my whole life being scared of him," she admitted. "But I'm tired of being scared. I want to fight back." Ethan leaned forward, his gaze steady. "We will. But you need to trust me, okay?" Emma met his eyes and nodded. By midday, The mansion buzzed with quiet activity. Anne made sure Megan stayed occupied with a puzzle in the sunroom, while Ethan worked in his study, making calls and gathering information. But Emma, restless and uneasy, wandered the halls. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Like the air before a storm, heavy and electric. She found herself in the library, the scent of old books wrapping around her like a familiar blanket. She ran her fingers along the spines, stopping at one with a faded leather cover. She pulled it out and opened it, but her mind wasn't on the words. The sound of footsteps behind her made her jump. She spun around to see Megan standing in the doorway, her head tilted in curiosity. "Hey," Megan said, walking in. "You okay?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Just thinking." Megan sat on the edge of a nearby armchair, tucking her legs beneath her. "About your dad?" Emma bit her lip. "I'm worried about what he'll do when he finds me." She closed the book and hugged it to her chest. "He's not the kind of person who forgives and forgets." Megan's expression softened. "I know what it's like to be scared of something you can't control. When I first got sick, I used to lie awake at night terrified that I wouldn't wake up the next morning. But my dad told me something that helped." Emma leaned forward slightly. "What did he say?" "He said fear is just a shadow. It only looks big until you face it head on. Once you shine a light on it, it's not so scary anymore." Emma smiled faintly. "Your dad's smart." "Yeah, he is," Megan agreed. "And he's not going to let anything happen to you." Emma's heart swelled with a mix of gratitude and hope. "Thanks, Megan." Megan grinned. "What are sisters for?" The word sisters caught Emma off guard, but it didn't feel wrong. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Later that afternoon, Ethan's phone buzzed on his desk. He answered quickly, recognizing the number. "What do you have for me?" The investigator's voice was tense. "Evans is on the move. He left his office 2 hours ago and we tracked him heading toward the coast. If he keeps going, he'll be in your area by tonight." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "Does he know exactly where we are?" "Not yet, but he's close." Ethan nodded, even though the man on the other end couldn't see him. "Keep following him. If he makes a move, call me immediately." He hung up and leaned back in his chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. He needed a plan, one that would end this once and for all. As he stood and grabbed his jacket, he heard footsteps approaching. He turned to see Emma standing in the doorway, her expression determined. "Is he coming?" she asked. Already knowing the answer, Ethan nodded. "We don't know exactly when, but it's likely." Emma took a step closer. "Then let me help. I know how he thinks, what his next move will be." Ethan hesitated. Every instinct told him to shield her from this, but she wasn't a child who needed coddling. She had survived things no one her age should have to face. "Okay," he said finally. "Tell me what you know." They sat down at the desk and Emma began to explain her father's patterns, how he always used others to do his dirty work, how he relied on intimidation and control. She described his weaknesses, the things that made him reckless. "He won't come alone," Emma warned. "He'll send people ahead to scope the place out, and when he shows up, it'll be to finish the job quickly." Ethan listened carefully, taking mental notes. "And what about leverage? Does he have any weaknesses we can use against him?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. "He's terrified of public humiliation. If his business reputation is destroyed, it's over for him. That's the only thing he cares about more than himself." A plan began to form in Ethan's mind, one that would hit Richard Evans where it hurt the most. "We can work with that," he said, a spark of determination in his voice. Just then, his phone buzzed again. He answered it quickly. "He's stopped at a motel about 10 miles from your location," the investigator reported, "but he won't stay there long." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Thanks. Keep me updated." When he hung up, he turned to Emma. "It's time." "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Stay close to Megan and Anne," Ethan replied. "If anything happens, Anne knows what to do." Emma nodded, but her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for his hand. Be careful, okay? Ethan squeezed her hand gently. I will be. As he left the room, Emma watched him go, a mix of fear and hope swirling in her chest. She wanted to believe they could win this fight. But the shadows of her past loomed large. But this time, she wasn't facing them alone. The evening sky bled into shades of deep orange and crimson as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the rocky cliffs surrounding the mansion. But inside the house, the air was cold with tension. Anne paced the kitchen, checking the locks on the back doors for the third time. Upstairs, Megan and Emma sat cross-legged on the bed, the room lit only by the dim glow of a bedside lamp. Megan flipped through a scrapbook, pointing to photos from past family vacations, beaches, amusement parks, lazy afternoons spent fishing with her dad. But Emma wasn't really paying attention. Her mind was elsewhere, running through every possible scenario of what could happen if her father showed up tonight. Emma? Megan's voice broke through her thoughts. You okay? Emma forced a small smile. Yeah, I'm just tired. Megan closed the scrapbook and leaned back against the headboard. It's gonna be okay, you know. My dad has everything under control. Emma wanted to believe that, but the knot in her stomach told her otherwise. She had seen firsthand how dangerous her father could be. No matter how strong or prepared Ethan was, Richard Evans wasn't a man who backed down easily. A knock at the door startled them both. Anne poked her head in, her expression soft but serious. Girls, why don't you come downstairs for dinner? It'll do you good to eat something. Emma hesitated but nodded. She knew she wouldn't be able to stomach much, but sitting around with Megan felt safer than being alone. In the dining room, the table was set with plates of steaming pasta, garlic bread, and salad. Anne moved efficiently between the kitchen and dining area, her sharp eyes darting toward the windows every so often. Emma sat next to Megan, picking at her plate while the conversation flowed around her. Megan was talking about a movie she had watched last week, but her voice sounded distant, muffled by the pounding of Emma's heart. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside made her flinch. Ethan walked into the room, his presence commanding but calm. He pulled out a chair at the head of the table and looked around at them, his gaze lingering on Emma for a moment. Everything okay? He asked, his voice gentle. Emma nodded, but Ethan saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her fork trembled slightly in her hand. He didn't press her. Instead, he turned his attention to Megan, who was happily rambling about her plans to finish a painting tomorrow. The calm was short-lived. The shrill ring of Ethan's phone cut through the room like a blade. Everyone froze as he pulled it from his pocket and answered quickly. Yeah? His expression darkened. Are you sure? He stood, pacing toward the window as he listened. Keep them there, don't let them get any closer. He hung up and turned to Anne. They're here, he said grimly. Anne's face paled, but she didn't miss a beat. What do you need me to do? Lock down the house, Ethan instructed. Make sure all the doors and windows are secure. Megan and Emma stay with you. Megan's fork clattered to her plate. What's happening, Dad? Ethan crouched beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It's just a precaution. I'll handle it, okay? Megan's eyes glistened with worry, but she nodded. Ethan turned to Emma. Stay inside, no matter what. I won't let him get to you. Emma's throat tightened as she whispered, Be careful. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. I will be. The night air was crisp as Ethan stepped outside, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. The moon hung low, casting pale light over the driveway. He could see the headlights of a black car parked just beyond the gate. A shadowy figure leaned against the hood, smoking a cigarette. Ethan approached slowly, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of backup. When he was within earshot, the man flicked his cigarette onto the ground and crushed it under his heel. Mr. Bennett, the man drawled, his voice oozing false politeness. Nice night for a confrontation, don't you think? Who are you? Ethan demanded. Name's Vance, the man said with a smirk. Richard Evans sent me to have a little chat. Ethan's jaw clenched. Tell Evans that if he wants to talk, he can do it himself. Vance chuckled, the sound grating like nails on a chalkboard. Oh, he'll be here soon enough, but first he wanted me to deliver a message. Ethan stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not interested in his threats." "It's not a threat," Vance said, his smirk fading into something colder. "It's a promise. Hand over the girl and this all ends tonight. No police, no trouble." Ethan took a step closer, his voice low and dangerous. "If you think I'm handing her over, you don't know me very well." Vance's eyes narrowed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Ethan leaned in, his tone lethal. "If you touch one hair on her head, you'll regret it for the rest of your life, however short that may be." For a moment, neither man moved. The tension between them crackled like static electricity. But Vance was the first to back down. He straightened, adjusting the collar of his jacket. "Suit yourself," he muttered. "But when Evans gets here, don't say I didn't warn you." He climbed into the car, and the engine roared to life. As the vehicle disappeared down the road, Ethan exhaled slowly, his fists still clenched. Back inside, Emma sat by the window in the living room, her breath fogging the glass as she stared into the darkness. She jumped when Ethan walked in, his presence filling the room. "Did he leave?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "For now," Ethan replied. He sat beside her on the couch, his gaze focused on the flickering streetlight outside. "But your father's coming. It's only a matter of time." Emma hugged her knees to her chest. "What if we can't stop him?" Ethan turned to her, his eyes filled with determination. "We can, and we will." Her lips trembled. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've fought for people I love before," Ethan said softly. "And I don't give up easily." Emma's breath hitched, but she didn't cry. She leaned her head against his shoulder, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," Ethan whispered, wrapping an arm around her. "But you're not alone." The night stretched on, but neither of them moved. They sat there together, waiting for the storm to break, knowing that when it did, they would face it head-on. The house was eerily quiet the next morning, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The golden light of dawn filtered through the windows, but it did little to lift the heaviness that had settled over everyone. Anne moved quietly through the kitchen preparing breakfast, while Emma sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea. She hadn't slept much, and the dark circles under her eyes mirrored Ethan's exhaustion as he entered the room. "Morning," he greeted softly, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Emma managed a small nod. "Morning." Anne placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of her. "Eat," she said gently. "You'll need your strength today." Emma took a small bite, but the food felt like lead in her stomach. Across the table, Ethan watched her carefully, his mind already racing with strategies for what lay ahead. He had spent the night going over every possible move Richard Evans could make, but there were too many unknowns. The only thing he was sure of was that Evans wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Megan appeared in the doorway, her hair slightly messy from sleep. She smiled when she saw Emma. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little," Emma lied. Megan sat beside her and nudged her playfully. "Don't worry, my dad's got this. He's like a superhero when it comes to protecting people." Emma tried to smile, but her mind was elsewhere. She glanced at Ethan, who was scrolling through messages on his phone. "What happens if he finds us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked up, his gaze steady. "He won't." "But what if he does?" Emma insisted, her voice trembling. "He's always one step ahead. That's how he's gotten away with everything for so long." Ethan set his coffee down and leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "Emma, listen to me. I know he's dangerous, and I know you've been living in fear of him for a long time. But you're not alone anymore. Whatever he throws at us, we'll handle it. Together." Anne cleared her throat, breaking the tension. "I'll check the security system again, just to be sure everything's in place." Ethan nodded in appreciation as Anne left the room. He turned back to Emma. "There's something else I want to talk to you about. Something important." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Ethan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I know you saw the notebook in my study. I saw the way you looked at me yesterday. You're wondering if I already know everything about your father. Emma's fingers tightened around her mug. Do you? I know enough, Ethan admitted. But what I don't know is how you want to handle this. I could take the evidence to the police, but if he's as well connected as you say, that might not be enough to stop him. Or we can go after his reputation, hit him where it hurts the most. Emma's mind raced. Exposing her father would mean dragging her family name through the mud. She had spent years living under his shadow, pretending everything was perfect. But pretending hadn't saved her. It had nearly killed her. We go after him, she said firmly. He doesn't deserve to get away with what he's done. Ethan nodded, a spark of pride in his eyes. Then that's what we'll do. By midday, the plan was in motion. Ethan had called his investigator and instructed him to gather every piece of dirt they had on Richard Evans, offshore accounts, fraudulent deals, anything that could destroy his reputation. Meanwhile, Emma stayed close to Megan, helping her with a painting project in the sunroom. The sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the colorful canvas Megan was working on. What do you think? Megan asked, holding up the painting of a beach scene. Emma smiled. It's beautiful. You're really talented. Megan shrugged, dipping her brush into a shade of blue. It's just a hobby. My dad says I should keep doing things that make me happy. Emma hesitated, then asked, What makes you happy the most? Megan thought for a moment. Being around people who care about me. She glanced at Emma and added, Like you. Emma's heart swelled with emotion. I'm glad I'm here. They painted in comfortable silence for a while until Megan asked, Do you ever think about what you'll do when all of this is over? Emma put down her brush and stared out the window. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. Well, you should, Megan said with a smile. Because you have a future, Emma. You just have to believe it. In the study, Ethan was on the phone with his investigator. How fast can you get everything ready? He asked, pacing the room. We're almost done compiling the files, the investigator replied. Once we release this, Evan's career will be over. But you need to be careful. He won't go down without a fight. I'm counting on that, Ethan said. Let me know the minute it's ready. He hung up and leaned against the desk, his thoughts racing. There was still one piece of the puzzle he needed to secure. Proof that Evans had attempted to kill his own daughter. Without it, the rest of the evidence would be damaging, but not enough to bring him down completely. Ethan's phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a text message from an unknown number. You think you're clever, Bennett? I'm coming for what's mine. Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. Evans was closer than he thought. He rushed out of the study and found Anne in the hallway. We need to move fast, he said. Evans is making his move. Anne's eyes widened. What do you need me to do? Keep the girls inside and stay by the panic button in case things go south, Ethan instructed. I'm heading to town to meet with the investigator. If I'm not back in 2 hours, call the police. Anne nodded, her expression tense but determined. Be careful, Ethan. I will. As he left the mansion, the weight of the situation pressed down on him. He knew this wasn't just a battle for Emma's safety. It was a battle for her future. And failure wasn't an option. Back inside, Emma sat by the window in Megan's room, her gaze fixed on the winding road leading away from the house. She knew Ethan was out there fighting for her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. Megan sat beside her, holding her hand. He'll be back soon, she said reassuringly. Emma nodded, but the knot in her stomach tightened. She had spent her whole life being one step behind her father, but this time she wasn't going to let him win. I'm not running anymore, she whispered, more to herself than to Megan. And as the first drops of rain began to fall, Emma braced herself for what was coming. The rain fell steadily, a soft pattering against the mansion's large windows. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, as though the house itself could sense the danger creeping closer. Emma sat in the living room, curled up on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders. Megan was beside her, doodling absent-mindedly in a sketchbook. Anne moved quietly through the room, her gaze flicking toward the windows every few minutes. They were waiting. For what? Emma wasn't entirely sure, but her instincts told her that tonight would change everything. "Do you think he's okay?" Megan asked, breaking the silence. Emma hugged the blanket tighter. "Your dad can handle anything." Anne sat down across from them, her expression softening for the first time that evening. "He's smart, and he's careful," she reassured them. "He knows what he's doing." Emma tried to believe that, but the weight of her father's threats pressed heavily on her chest. She had seen him destroy people without breaking a sweat. He wasn't just a bad man, he was ruthless. And if Ethan wasn't back soon… A sudden knock on the front door shattered the silence. Anne shot to her feet, her body tense. "Stay here," she ordered the girls, her voice steady despite the fear that flickered in her eyes. She grabbed the nearest phone and quietly activated the panic button Ethan had installed, which would alert the security company. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears as she watched Anne walk toward the door. The knock came again, louder this time. She wanted to run, to hide, but something kept her rooted in place, kept her. Anne peered through the peephole, her hand hovering over the doorknob. After a moment, she turned back to them. "It's a delivery man," she said, her tone uncertain. Emma frowned. "A delivery? At this hour?" Anne's hesitation mirrored her own doubts. "Stay here," she repeated and cautiously opened the door, leaving the chain lock in place. A man in a rain-soaked jacket stood on the porch, holding a package under his arm. His baseball cap was pulled low, obscuring most of his face. "Package for Ethan Bennett," the man said, his voice muffled by the rain. Anne narrowed her eyes. "He's not home, leave it on the porch." The man didn't move. "He needs to sign for it." Anne's fingers tightened on the doorframe. "I said leave it." For a moment the man stood there, silent and unmoving. Then, without warning, he lunged at the door, slamming it with such force that the chain snapped. Anne stumbled backward, but her reflexes were quick. She grabbed a nearby vase and hurled it at him, shattering it against his shoulder. "Run!" Anne yelled to Emma and Megan. Emma's heart leapt into her throat as she grabbed Megan's hand and bolted toward the back of the house. They sprinted down the corridor, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Behind them, the sounds of a struggle filled the air, Anne shouting. Furniture being overturned, glass shattering. Emma's breath came in ragged gasps as they reached the back entrance. She fumbled with the lock, her hands trembling. "Come on," she whispered desperately. The door finally gave way, and they stumbled into the rain-soaked night. The cold air bit at Emma's skin. But she didn't stop. She pulled Megan along, her only thought to get as far away from the house as possible. "Where are we going?" Megan asked, her voice panicked. "The boathouse," Emma replied breathlessly. "We'll hide there until Ethan comes back." The boathouse was a small structure tucked behind the cliffs, accessible by a narrow path that wound through the trees. The rain made the ground slippery, and Emma nearly lost her footing several times, but she didn't dare slow down. They reached the boathouse, its wooden exterior weathered from years of salty air and storms. Emma pushed the door open and pulled Megan inside, slamming it shut behind them. She leaned against the door, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. Megan collapsed onto a bench, her face pale. "Do you think Anne's okay?" Emma wiped the rain from her face, her stomach twisting with guilt. "I don't know." She peered out the small window. But the rain was too heavy to see much. The mansion was just a dark silhouette against the stormy sky. "We can't stay here long," Emma said. "He might send more people to look for us." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared, Emma." Emma knelt in front of her, gripping her hands tightly. "I am too. But we're going to get through this. Your dad will come back and he'll fix everything." A loud crash outside made both girls jump. Emma's eyes darted to the window, but she couldn't see anything through the rain. Her mind raced. Had someone followed them? Were they trapped? "I think someone's out there," Megan whispered. Emma's heart pounded as she looked around the boathouse. There was an old oar leaning against the wall, and she grabbed it, gripping it tightly like a weapon. "Stay behind me," she told Megan. The door rattled, and Emma's breath hitched. She raised the oar, her muscles tensing as the door creaked open. For a split second, she braced herself for the worst. Then she saw him. "Dad!" Megan cried, running into Ethan's arms. Ethan held her tightly, his face a mixture of relief and worry. "Are you both okay?" Emma nodded, her grip on the oar loosening. "Anne, she's fine," Ethan said quickly. "She called me as soon as the alarm went off. The guy who broke in is gone, but Evans isn't far behind." He looked at Emma, his expression grim. "We need to leave, now." The drive through the winding coastal road was tense, the rain blurring the view ahead. Ethan kept one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally reaching back to check on the girls. "Where are we going?" Emma asked, her voice shaky. "To a safe house," Ethan replied. "It's not far. My investigator arranged everything." Emma leaned back against the seat, her mind racing. She wanted to believe they were safe, but the shadows of the past felt closer than ever. Megan reached over and squeezed her hand. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, as if trying to convince herself as much as Emma. Ethan's phone buzzed and he answered it without taking his eyes off the road. "Yeah?" His grip on the wheel tightened. "I understand, thanks." When he hung up, Emma's stomach twisted. "What is it?" "Evans knows we're on the move," Ethan said. "But he doesn't know where we're headed." Emma swallowed hard. "How long can we keep running?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "We won't have to run for long. I have everything I need to end this." Emma nodded, but the fear in her chest didn't ease. She knew this fight wasn't over, not yet, but as she looked at Ethan, his determination unwavering, she realized something important. She wasn't the same terrified girl who had been thrown into the ocean that night. She had survived once, and she could survive again. The storm wasn't going to break her. The rain had eased into a light drizzle by the time Ethan pulled the car off the main road and onto a narrow gravel path lined with tall trees. The tires crunched against the rocks as they approached an old stone cottage nestled between the woods and the cliffs. Its small windows were dimly lit, casting a soft glow against the overcast sky. "We're here," Ethan announced, cutting the engine. Emma peered out the window, her breath fogging the glass. The cottage looked sturdy but isolated, a place meant to hide, not to live. She wondered how long they would have to stay here. Megan yawned, rubbing her eyes as she sat up in the back seat. "It looks cozy," she said sleepily. Ethan smiled faintly. "It's safe. That's what matters." He stepped out of the car and quickly opened the doors for the girls. The air was crisp and cool, with the faint scent of rain lingering in the breeze. Emma shivered as they made their way inside, the creaky wooden door closing behind them. The interior of the cottage was simple, but warm. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, its hearth stacked with firewood. A worn leather couch sat in front of it, and a small kitchen occupied one corner of the room. There were 2 doors leading to the bedrooms, and the scent of pine filled the air. "I'll get the fire going," Ethan said, shrugging off his jacket and tossing it over a chair. "Make yourselves comfortable." Megan immediately plopped down on the couch, curling up under a wool blanket. Emma, however, couldn't sit still. She wandered around the room, her fingers tracing the edges of the wooden furniture. Her mind was restless, racing with thoughts of what could happen next. She heard the crackle of the fire as Ethan lit the logs, the warmth slowly spreading through the room. He glanced over at her, concern etched into his features. "Are you okay?" Emma nodded, but she knew the lie wasn't convincing. Ethan stood and walked over to her, lowering his voice so Megan couldn't hear. "Talk to me, Emma. What's going on in that head of yours?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I keep thinking about what happens if we can't stop him. What if he finds us here?" Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He won't. I have people watching every move he makes. If he comes within a mile of this place, we'll know." "But how can you be sure?" Her voice cracked, the fear she had been holding in finally surfacing. "He always finds a way. He's never lost before." Ethan knelt slightly so that he was at eye level with her. "This time is different," he said gently. "You're not fighting him alone. I've spent years dealing with people like your father, men who think they can do whatever they want and get away with it. But they all have one weakness: the truth. And I have everything I need to make sure the truth ruins him." Emma's lips trembled, but she nodded. "You've been strong for so long," Ethan continued. "It's okay to be scared, but don't let that fear control you." Emma wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. "Okay, okay." Ethan smiled softly, giving her shoulder a gentle squeeze before standing. "Why don't you get some rest? You've had a long couch." Her head resting against a pillow, while Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. The glow of the screen illuminated his face as he reviewed the files the investigator had sent him. Bank statements, offshore accounts, falsified documents. All of it pointed to years of illegal activity. But what he needed now was something stronger, something that would break Richard Evans beyond repair. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. His phone buzzed and he quickly answered it. "Ethan, it's me," the investigator said. "I've got something you'll want to see." "What is it?" "Security footage from the marina on the night Emma went missing. There's a camera that caught Evans leaving the docks alone, and the timestamp lines up with the storm." Ethan's heart raced. "You're sure it's him?" "Positive. The footage is clear. And there's more. One of the marina workers remembers seeing him arguing with a girl that night. He didn't think much of it at the time. But when I showed him Emma's picture, he confirmed it was her." Ethan exhaled sharply, a mix of relief and anger flooding through him. This was the proof they needed. "Send me everything," he said. "I'll take care of the rest." "Be careful, Ethan," the investigator warned. "Evans won't go down without a fight." "I know," Ethan replied before ending the call. He sat in silence for a moment, staring at the laptop screen. The weight of the situation pressed down on him, but he knew they were close to the end. Evans' empire was about to crumble, and once it did, he wouldn't be able to hurt Emma, or anyone else, ever again. In the bedroom, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The sound of the rain against the window was soothing, but it couldn't quiet her mind. She kept thinking about the night her father had thrown her into the ocean, the cold water pulling her down, the fear that had gripped her chest. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she said, sitting up. Ethan entered, his expression gentle but serious. He sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping slightly under his weight. "I have good news," he said. "We have the proof we need. Security footage, witness statements, everything." Emma's eyes widened. "You mean we can stop him?" "Yes," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I'm sending the evidence to the authorities first thing in the morning. Once it's out there, Evans won't have anywhere to hide." For the first time in days, Emma felt a flicker of hope. She wrapped her arms around Ethan, surprising both of them. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan hugged her back, his grip protective. "You don't have to thank me. You deserve to be free from him." As they pulled away, Ethan looked her in the eyes. "But we're not out of the woods yet. He's still out there, and he knows we're a threat. Until the authorities act, we need to be careful." Emma nodded, her determination returning. "I'm ready." Ethan smiled faintly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, everything changes." As he left the room, Emma lay back down, her mind finally beginning to quiet. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that they could win. Tomorrow, her father's reign of terror would end. Morning arrived with a crisp breeze blowing through the trees surrounding the safe house. The rain had stopped, and sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting golden patterns on the gravel path outside. Inside, the warmth of the fireplace still lingered, but the atmosphere remained tense. Emma sat at the kitchen table, staring at her untouched plate of toast and scrambled eggs. The knot in her stomach made it impossible to eat, even though she knew she needed the energy. Across from her, Megan was happily munching on her breakfast, occasionally glancing up to make sure Emma was okay. "You should eat," Megan said, her voice soft but encouraging. "Today's a big day." Emma nodded but didn't pick up her fork, Her mind was elsewhere, swirling with memories of her father and what he might do when he realized his empire was crumbling. "Do you think it's really going to work?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Megan leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "My dad doesn't lose," she said confidently. "If he says we've got this, then we've got this." Emma tried to believe her, but the weight of years spent under her father's control made it hard. She had learned to expect the worst, to anticipate betrayal at every turn. Trusting in hope felt foreign, dangerous even. The sound of Ethan's footsteps approaching snapped her out of her thoughts. He entered the kitchen, a stack of papers in his hand, and a determined look on his face. "It's time," he said, setting the papers on the table. "Everything is ready. The evidence has been sent to the authorities, and I've arranged for a press release to go out this afternoon. By the end of the day, Richard Evans' world will start falling apart." Emma's heart raced. What if he finds out before then? Ethan met her gaze, his voice steady. "He probably already knows, but that doesn't change anything. He can't outrun the truth." Megan reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. "You're safe here. He can't hurt you anymore." Emma nodded, her fingers tightening around Megan's. "Anne will be back soon with groceries," Ethan continued, checking his phone. "Until then, I want both of you to stay inside. I don't want to take any chances." Megan rolled her eyes playfully. "Dad, we're not going anywhere. You've got us on lockdown." Ethan chuckled softly. "Good." He ruffled her hair and gave Emma a reassuring smile before stepping into the next room to make a call. For the first time that morning, Emma felt a sliver of calm. Maybe Megan was right. Maybe today would be the day everything changed. Hours passed slowly. Emma and Megan spent most of the morning playing board games in the living room, but Emma's mind remained restless. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, like the calm before a storm. By noon, Anne had returned with bags of groceries, and the smell of freshly baked bread filled the house. But even the comforting aroma couldn't ease Emma's nerves. She sat by the window, her eyes fixed on the winding road that led to the safe house. "Expecting someone?" Anne asked. Setting a glass of lemonade on the windowsill beside her, Emma shook her head. "Just making sure no one's coming." Anne sat down next to her, her expression warm but serious. "Ethan has everything under control. I know you're scared, but you don't have to carry this alone." Emma looked down at her hands. "It's hard to believe that after all this time he's finally going to be stopped." Anne placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Some people spend their whole lives running from their past, but you're facing it head on. That takes courage." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. "I just want it to be over." "It will be," Anne promised. A knock at the door startled them both. Anne stood quickly, her body tense. "Stay here," she instructed Emma. As Anne approached the door, Ethan appeared from the hallway, his phone still in his hand. He exchanged a brief look with Anne, silently signaling her to be cautious. "Who is it?" Anne called through the door. "It's me," a familiar voice answered. "Tom, the investigator." Ethan relaxed slightly and nodded for Anne to open the door. The moment Tom stepped inside, Ethan pulled him aside into the study, closing the door behind them. Emma's curiosity got the better of her. She stood and crept toward the study, pressing her ear against the door to listen. "The press release is scheduled for 3 p.m., Tom was saying, "but we have a problem." Emma's breath hitched. "What kind of problem?" Ethan asked. "Evans has people watching the media outlets. He'll know the second the story breaks. And he won't go quietly. I've already heard rumblings that he's preparing to flee the country." Ethan's voice hardened. "Then we need to make sure he doesn't get that chance." "There's more," Tom added. "One of my contacts overheard a conversation between Evans and his lawyer. He knows Emma's alive, and he's planning to use her as leverage to negotiate his way out of this." Emma's blood ran cold. She backed away from the door, her heart pounding. The door opened suddenly and she found herself face to face with Ethan. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't scold her. "You heard, didn't you?" Emma nodded. her throat too tight to speak. Ethan guided her back to the living room and sat her down on the couch. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "I won't let him get near you. We have people watching him, and the moment he tries to make a move, they'll step in." Emma's hands trembled. "But what if he finds us first?" "He won't," Ethan assured her. "This place is secure. No one knows we're here." Megan entered the room, her brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on?" Ethan hesitated, then sighed. "Emma's father is trying to find her, but we're one step ahead of him." Megan sat next to Emma, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We've got this," she said confidently. "Don't forget, my dad doesn't lose." Ethan smiled faintly. "Megan's right. I need you to trust me, Emma. We're almost there. Just hold on a little longer." Emma took a shaky breath and nodded. As the afternoon wore on, the tension in the house grew. Ethan received constant updates from the investigator, each one bringing them closer to the moment when the world would finally see Richard Evans for who he really was. At 2:45 p.m., Ethan gathered everyone in the living room. "The press release goes live in 15 minutes, he said. "Once it's out there, the authorities will move in." Emma's heart raced as she watched the clock on the wall. Each tick felt like a drumbeat in her chest. The minutes crawled by, and when the clock struck 3, Ethan's phone buzzed with a notification. He opened it quickly and scanned the message, his expression shifting from relief to determination. "It's done," he said. "The story's out, and the evidence is in the hands of the authorities. Evans won't be able to hide from this." Emma exhaled a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. But just as relief began to wash over her, Ethan's phone buzzed again. He answered it, his face darkening as he listened. "What is it?" Anne asked, her voice tight. Ethan ended the call and turned to them. His eyes filled with urgency. "Evans knows, and he's on his way here." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. "Evans knows, and he's on his way here." Emma felt her breath hitch, her body stiffening as fear crawled up her spine. The warmth of the fire no longer seemed to reach her, and the steady ticking of the clock only amplified the dread settling in her chest. Megan was the first to speak. "How long do we have?" Ethan checked his phone, his jaw tightening as he calculated. "Not long. He's about 45 minutes out, but we can't assume that's the only team he's sending." He looked at Anne. "Lock the house down. Every door, every window." Anne didn't hesitate. She grabbed the set of keys from the kitchen counter and moved swiftly through the house. Securing every entry point, Emma stood frozen, her mind racing. "What do? We can't outrun him forever." Ethan walked over to her, placing his hands firmly on her shoulders. "We're not running," he said, his voice steady. "We've already taken the first step. The authorities are after him now. And he's desperate. That's why he's coming here. But desperate men make mistakes, and we're going to use that against him." Emma's lips trembled, but she nodded. Deep down, she knew this moment would come. It was inevitable. Richard Evans wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted, but this time she wasn't a helpless little girl. "I'm ready," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Ethan gave her a small, reassuring smile before turning to Megan. "I need you to stay close to Anne. No matter what happens, you don't leave her side." Megan's eyes were wide, but she nodded. "Got it." Emma watched as Ethan moved toward the door, grabbing his jacket and a small duffel bag he had packed the night before. She could hear the faint clink of metal inside, and she didn't have to ask what it was. She knew he had weapons in there, just in case. He glanced at her one last time before stepping outside. "Stay inside, Emma, I mean it." But as the door closed behind him, Emma knew she couldn't just sit and wait. The air outside was cool and damp from the rain, and the gravel crunched beneath Ethan's boots as he made his way toward the driveway. He scanned the tree line, his senses heightened. The safe house was secluded, surrounded by dense forest, but that also made it the perfect place for an ambush. He pulled out his phone and called the investigator. "Where are the authorities? They need to get here now." "They're on their way," the investigator assured him. "But Evans has a head start. We're tracking his car, but there's a chance he's using back roads to avoid detection." Ethan cursed under his breath. "Keep me updated." He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. His fingers brushed against the handle of the small pistol tucked into his jacket, a reminder of just how far he was willing to go to protect the people inside. The faint sound of an engine in the distance made him tense. He crouched behind a large tree near the driveway, his eyes narrowing as he tried to determine its direction. The sound grew louder, echoing off the trees like a drumbeat. Then he saw it, a black SUV, its headlights cutting through the fog as it approached the safe house. Ethan's grip tightened around the pistol. He wasn't going to let Evans set foot inside. Inside the safe house, Emma paced the living room, her anxiety building with each passing second. Megan sat on the couch with Anne, who kept her phone in hand, ready to call for backup if necessary. "I can't just sit here," Emma said, her voice shaky. Anne stood and placed a hand on Emma's arm. "I know you're scared, but Ethan knows what he's doing. The best thing you can do is stay safe." Emma bit her lip, her gaze darting toward the window. The fog outside made it difficult to see anything beyond a few feet, but she could feel the danger closing in. Her father was out there and she couldn't shake the image of his cold, calculating eyes. Suddenly, the sound of a gunshot pierced the air, making them all jump. Megan gasped, clutching Anne's arm. "What was that?" Emma's heart pounded as she ran to the window, her hands pressed against the cold glass. She couldn't see anything, but the fear in her chest told her that Ethan was in trouble. Without thinking, she grabbed a flashlight from the shelf and headed toward the door. "Emma, wait!" Anne called after her. But Emma didn't stop. She couldn't. Ethan crouched behind the tree, his breath coming in quick bursts. The first gunshot had been a warning. He hadn't aimed to kill. But now that the SUV had stopped and its doors were swinging open, he knew the time for warnings was over. Two men stepped out, both armed, their eyes scanning the area. They were dressed in black, blending seamlessly with the night. Ethan waited until they were close enough, then fired again, hitting one of them in the leg. The man fell to the ground with a grunt, his gun clattering to the dirt. The second man ducked behind the SUV and returned fire, the bullets whizzing past Ethan's head and splintering the bark of the tree. Ethan pressed himself against the trunk, his mind racing. He needed to disable them quickly before Evans arrived. Then he heard it, the faint crunch of footsteps behind him. He spun around, his gun raised but froze when he saw who it was. "Emma," he hissed, lowering the weapon. "What are you doing here?" She was out of breath, her hair damp from the fog, but her eyes were steady. "I couldn't stay inside, I had to help." Ethan's frustration was evident, but there was no time to argue. The second man was still firing, and they were running out of cover. "Fine," he said, grabbing her arm and pulling her down behind the tree. "Stay low and follow my lead." They crawled through the underbrush, the wet leaves clinging to their clothes. Ethan spotted the second man reloading his weapon and took the opportunity to fire. The shot hit the man's shoulder, and he dropped to the ground, writhing in pain. Ethan exhaled, relief flooding through him. But the moment was short-lived. The sound of another engine approached, and this time Ethan didn't have to guess who it was. The black sedan came to a stop just behind the SUV, and the driver's side door opened. Richard Evans stepped out, his expression cold and unreadable. Emma's breath hitched as she saw him. Her father hadn't changed. His neatly tailored suit, his polished shoes, and the aura of control that surrounded him were exactly as she remembered. But there was something more dangerous in his eyes now. Desperation. He scanned the area, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. "Emma," he called out, his voice cutting through the night. "You can't hide forever." Ethan looked at Emma, his voice barely a whisper. "Stay here." "No," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I have to face him." Ethan's eyes softened. He saw the determination in her gaze and knew there was no stopping her. "Okay," he said, "but I'm not leaving your side." Together, they stepped out from behind the trees, the flashlight casting a beam of light onto the gravel path. Richard's eyes locked onto Emma, and for a moment his expression flickered, something between surprise and fury. "There you are," he said, taking a step forward. Emma's hands balled into fists. "It's over, Dad. The authorities know everything. You can't win." Richard chuckled, the sound low and menacing. You think this is over just because of a few news reports? I built this empire from the ground up, and I'm not going to let you destroy it. Ethan stepped in front of Emma, his gun raised. You're not getting near her. Richard's gaze darkened. Do you really think you can protect her forever? Emma's voice cut through the tension. I don't need him to protect me. Her breath trembled, but she held her ground. I'm not scared of you anymore. Richard's jaw tightened. But before he could respond, the distant sound of sirens filled the air. His head snapped toward the noise, and for the first time, Emma saw fear in his eyes. They're coming for you, she said. It's over. Richard hesitated, his fingers twitching near the gun on his hip. But he knew the truth. His time had run out. Without another word, he turned and sprinted toward the sedan. Ethan raised his gun, but Emma placed a hand on his arm. Let him go, she whispered. The police will catch him. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. As the sedan disappeared down the road, Emma collapsed into Ethan's arms, the weight of the moment finally crashing down on her. It's over, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. It's finally over. Ethan held her tightly, his voice soft. You did it, Emma. You won. And for the first time in years, Emma believed it. The police lights flashed against the trees, casting red and blue hues over the safe house like a broken kaleidoscope. Officers moved in and out of the area, their voices crackling over radios as they secured the perimeter. The sound of gravel crunching beneath their boots mixed with the distant hum of sirens fading into the night. Emma sat on the front steps of the safe house, a thick blanket draped around her shoulders. She stared out into the darkness, her mind spinning even as the chaos around her began to settle. Ethan sat beside her, his arm resting protectively on her back. You're safe now, he said gently, but Emma didn't respond. She felt numb, as though her body and mind were disconnected. The moment Richard had driven off, something inside her had unraveled. The fear, the anger, the years of living under his shadow, they had all come crashing down, leaving her hollow and exhausted. I thought I'd feel better, she whispered finally, her voice barely audible over the hum of the night. Ethan tightened his grip on her shoulder. Give it time. You've been carrying this for a long time. Emma nodded, though she wasn't sure time was the answer. The weight of what had just happened clung to her like a second skin, and she didn't know how to shed it. A police officer approached them, his flashlight cutting through the fog. Mr. Bennett? Ethan stood, his expression shifting from protective to businesslike. Yes? We've got roadblocks set up along the highway. Evans won't get far. The officer's voice was calm but firm. We've also secured the evidence you provided. It's strong enough to hold him, but we'll need statements from both of you as soon as possible. Ethan nodded. Of course, we'll cooperate fully. The officer glanced at Emma, his gaze softening. You did the right thing, Miss Evans. This will all be over soon. Emma managed a small nod, but the words felt distant, like they were meant for someone else. As the officer walked away, she looked up at Ethan. What if he gets away? He won't, Ethan said firmly. Not this time. The door to the safe house creaked open and Megan stepped outside, her face pale but relieved when she saw Emma sitting there. Are you okay? Emma forced a smile and opened her arms. Megan rushed forward, wrapping her in a tight hug. The warmth of Megan's embrace was the only thing that kept her grounded, tethering her to the present. I was so scared, Megan whispered. When I heard the gunshots, I thought, I'm okay. Emma interrupted, her voice cracking. I promise. Megan pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. We're going to be okay now, right? Emma hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, we are. Inside the safe house, Anne was making tea, her movements steady and deliberate as she tried to bring some normalcy back to the night. The kitchen was warm, and the faint scent of lavender tea leaves filled the air. She glanced up as Ethan. Emma and Megan entered, her gaze softening when she saw Emma's tear-streaked face. Sit, Anne instructed gently, setting the steaming mugs on the table. Emma sat down, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic as the heat seeped into her fingers. She hadn't realized how cold she was until that moment. Anne sat across from her, studying her carefully. "I've seen people carry heavy burdens before," she said softly, "but you don't have to carry this one alone anymore." Emma blinked, her throat tightening. "I've been so used to running and hiding that I don't know what to do now." Anne reached across the table and placed her hand over Emma's. "You heal. One day at a time. It won't be easy, but you're stronger than you think." Megan leaned against Emma's shoulder, her voice soft. "We'll help you." Ethan nodded from where he stood by the window. "You've already done the hardest part, Emma. The rest is about learning how to live without fear." Emma's chest tightened as fresh tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know how to do that." "You'll figure it out," Ethan said gently, "and you won't have to do it alone." Later that night, after the police had left and the house was quiet again, Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The glow of the moon filtered through the curtains, casting faint patterns of light on the walls. She thought about the moment her father had stepped out of the car, the cold look in his eyes, and the way he had tried to control her even at the end. But she had stood her ground. She had faced him, and for the first time in her life, she hadn't backed down. The memory of his words lingered in her mind. "You can't hide forever." But she wasn't hiding anymore. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she said. Ethan entered, his presence filling the room with a sense of calm. He sat on the edge of the bed, his expression gentle. "I just wanted to check on you." Emma sat up, pulling the blanket around her. "I'm okay, I think." Ethan smiled faintly. "You did something brave tonight, Emma. You should be proud of yourself." Emma looked down at her hands, tracing the lines of her palms. "It doesn't feel like I won. It feels like I lost something." "You didn't lose," Ethan said softly. "You let go. There's a difference." Emma's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't just tears of fear. They were tears of release. "I just want to feel normal again." "You will," Ethan promised. "It'll take time, but you'll get there. And we'll be here every step of the way." Emma nodded, the warmth of his words sinking in. She lay back down and Ethan stood, brushing a hand gently over her hair before heading for the door. "Ethan?" she called after him. He turned, his hand resting on the doorknob. "Yeah?" "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled, the kind of smile that told her she wasn't alone anymore. "Good night, Emma." As the door closed behind him, Emma closed her eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the safe house, casting a golden glow on the wooden floors. The house, which had been filled with tension and fear the night before, was now eerily quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the radio in the kitchen, where Anne was preparing breakfast. The smell of bacon and freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but Emma had no appetite. She sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with trembling fingers. The news was everywhere. Headlines splashed across every major media outlet. Business mogul Richard Evans, under investigation for fraud, corruption, and attempted murder. Richard Evans' criminal empire unraveled by shocking evidence. Daughter's testimony exposes the dark secrets of a powerful man. Emma swallowed hard as she read the articles. They described her father's illegal dealings in detail, offshore accounts, bribery, money laundering. But what hit her hardest was the section about her. The reporters hadn't mentioned her name directly, but the phrases "estranged daughter" and "victim of attempted murder" were enough to make her heart race. She put the phone down, her hands trembling. The world knew now. Everyone knew. Ethan entered the kitchen, freshly showered and looking more relaxed than he had in days. But when he saw Emma's expression, his smile faded. "You saw the news?" Emma nodded, staring down at the table. "It's everywhere." Ethan pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "I know it's overwhelming, but this is what we wanted. The truth is out and people are paying attention. He can't hide anymore." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I'd feel relieved, but I don't. I feel exposed." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "That's normal. You've kept this buried for so long, and now it's out there for the world to see. It's going to take time to adjust." Emma bit her lip, her gaze dropping to her lap. What if people think I'm lying? What if they believe him instead of me? Ethan's grip on her hand tightened. They won't. We have the evidence, and the police are already building a case against him. And even if some people doubt you, it doesn't change the truth. You survived, Emma. That's what matters. Emma nodded, wiping away a stray tear. I just don't want to be that girl people feel sorry for. I want to be someone who moves on. You will be, Ethan said gently. This is just the beginning of a new chapter. As the morning passed, the phone calls started. Reporters were trying to contact Ethan, and even the police called to ask follow-up questions. Ethan handled it all, shielding Emma from most of it, while Anne and Megan kept her distracted with games and small tasks around the house. By noon, the tension in Emma's chest had eased slightly, and she found herself sitting with Megan on the porch swing outside. The breeze was cool and carried the scent of pine and salt from the nearby ocean. Megan rocked the swing gently with her feet, her sketchbook balanced on her lap. Are you okay? Megan asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Emma shrugged. I don't know. I guess I'm still processing everything. Megan flipped a page in her sketchbook and began to draw. When I first got sick, I used to feel the same way, like the whole world knew something about me that I wasn't ready to share. Emma tilted her head, curious. How did you deal with it? Megan smiled faintly. I let people think whatever they wanted. Some people pitied me, some people ignored me, and a few people actually understood. But in the end, I realized that what they thought didn't matter as much as what I thought about myself. Emma absorbed her words, the knot in her chest loosening slightly. I wish I had your confidence. You will, Megan said with a grin. You just need time. Emma's lips curved into a small smile. I'm really glad I met you. Same, Megan replied, sketching quickly. Now, hold still, I'm drawing you. Emma laughed softly, leaning back against the swing. For the first time that day, she felt a sliver of peace. Inside the house, Ethan paced the living room as he spoke on the phone with the lead detective handling the case. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp and focused. Do you have a location on him? He asked, pausing by the window to look outside. We tracked his car to a private airfield, but he abandoned it, the detective replied. We're working on locating him now, but he's good at covering his tracks. Ethan's jaw tightened. What about the arrest warrant? It's being finalized, the detective said. We'll have it within the hour, but I wouldn't be surprised if Evans tries to leave the country before then. Ethan sighed. Do whatever it takes to stop him. Emma deserves justice. We're on it, the detective assured him. After ending the call, Ethan leaned against the wall, his thoughts racing. He had done everything he could to protect Emma, but the possibility of her father slipping away still haunted him. If Evans disappeared, it would only be a matter of time before he tried to strike again. Anne entered the room carrying a tray of tea. You look like you haven't had a break all morning, she said, setting the tray on the coffee table. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. I can't relax until I know he's behind bars. Anne poured him a cup of tea and handed it to him. He's slipping, Ethan. Men like him don't know how to handle defeat. He'll make a mistake. I hope you're right, Ethan murmured, taking a sip. Anne smiled knowingly. I usually am. That evening, the safe house was quiet again. The police had called to update them. The arrest warrant had been issued, and roadblocks were in place near major airports and border crossings. But Evans was still at large, and the uncertainty gnawed at Emma's nerves. She sat on the couch, scrolling through the news on her phone. Most of the articles were about her father's downfall, but a few mentioned her directly. Some reporters speculated about her role in the case, while others praised her for coming forward. Her fingers hovered over the screen as she read a comment from a reader. She's brave for speaking out. I hope she finds peace. The words hit her harder than she expected, and she blinked back tears. She wasn't used to being called brave. For so long she had seen herself as weak, someone who had barely survived. But maybe that wasn't the whole story. Maybe surviving was its own kind of strength. Ethan entered the room, sitting down beside her. "What are you reading?" Emma handed him the phone, showing him the comment. He read it and smiled. "They're right, you know." Emma looked away, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't feel brave." "You will," Ethan said, his voice gentle. "And someday, when you look back on this, you'll see just how strong you were." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder, the weight of the day finally beginning to lift. "I hope so." As the night settled in, Emma allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild the life her father had tried to destroy. The safe house was cloaked in the soft glow of twilight, the last rays of the sun casting long shadows over the trees. The warmth from the fireplace flickered gently, but it couldn't completely melt the lingering tension in the room. Emma sat on the couch with her legs tucked beneath her, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She was trying to focus on the book in her hands, but the words blurred together, her mind elsewhere. Across the room, Megan was sitting at the kitchen table, finishing a watercolor painting of the cliffs behind the house. Her brush glided smoothly across the paper, the soft strokes creating a calming rhythm. Ethan entered the room with a steaming mug of tea and handed it to Emma. "You haven't eaten much today," he said, sitting down beside her. Emma took the mug, cradling it between her hands. "I'm not really hungry." "You need to take care of yourself," Ethan said gently. "We're almost through this." Emma nodded but didn't take a sip. She could sense the unease in Ethan, even though he tried to hide it. His shoulders were tense, and his eyes, though kind, were constantly scanning the room as if he expected someone to burst through the door at any moment. "How long do you think it'll take for them to find him?" she asked. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "They've narrowed down his location, but he's good at slipping through cracks. The important thing is that the authorities know who they're looking for now. He's not invincible anymore." Emma stared into the amber liquid in her mug. "I keep thinking about how he used to act when I was younger, like nothing could touch him. No matter what he did, he always got away with it." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Not this time. He's cornered, and when people like him feel trapped, they make mistakes. That's when we catch them." The conviction in Ethan's voice was comforting, but Emma's doubts lingered. What if he doesn't make a mistake? What if he disappears and comes back later, when we least expect it? "He won't," Ethan said firmly. "And if he tries, we'll be ready. You don't have to live in fear anymore." Emma wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that her father was just a man and not the unstoppable force she had always imagined. But after years of living under his control, it wasn't easy to let go of the fear. Megan looked up from her painting, sensing the tension. "Why don't we play a game or watch a movie, something to take our minds off all this?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, a game sounds good." "Great," Megan said, grinning as she jumped up to grab a board game from the shelf. "Let's play something easy. No thinking aloud." Ethan chuckled softly. "I like the sound of that." As the night deepened, the sound of laughter echoed through the safe house. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emma allowed herself to laugh without holding back. The game was silly. Megan kept making up her own rules, and Ethan pretended to be offended every time she cheated. But beneath the laughter, a quiet understanding settled between them. They weren't just playing a game, they were reclaiming something that Richard Evans had tried to take away: joy. Anne entered the room, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I haven't heard this much noise in days," she teased. "It's a nice change." Megan leaned back in her chair, victorious after winning the last round. "I'm a board game champion, officially unbeatable." "You're only unbeatable because you make up half the rules," Ethan said with a mock glare. Megan stuck her tongue out at him, and Emma couldn't help but laugh. For a moment, the heaviness in her chest lifted. She felt normal, safe, but the moment didn't last. Ethan's phone buzzed on the coffee table, its vibration cutting through the laughter like a knife. The room fell silent as he picked it up, his face hardening as he read the message. "What is it?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting hers. They found him. The living room was filled with tension as Ethan paced back and forth, the phone still clutched in his hand. Emma sat on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest while Megan and Anne watched silently from the kitchen. They found him at a safe house just outside the city, Ethan explained. He tried to bribe his way out, but the police moved in before he could escape. Emma's heart raced. Is he in custody? Ethan hesitated, and Emma's breath caught in her throat. Not yet, he admitted. He managed to slip away before they could arrest him. But they're closing in. They think he's heading for the docks, trying to catch a private boat out of the country. Emma's hands trembled. What if he gets away? Ethan sat beside her, taking her hands in his. He won't. They've got checkpoints at every major route out of the city. They're tightening the net. Emma nodded. But her mind refused to calm down. Her father had escaped before, and he was a master at slipping through cracks. If he managed to disappear now, he could come back months or even years later, and she would never truly be free. Megan scooted closer, resting her head on Emma's shoulder. I know you're scared, she said softly. But you're not the same person you were when this started. You've already beaten him in the most important way. You took away his power over you. Emma's throat tightened. It doesn't feel like I've won. You have, Megan insisted. And no matter what happens next, you're not alone. Ethan stood. Ethan, his eyes filled with determination. I'm going to make a few calls. The authorities are doing everything they can, but I want to make sure nothing slips through the cracks. Anne followed him into the other room, leaving Emma and Megan alone on the couch. Do you remember the first night we met? Megan asked suddenly. Breaking the silence, Emma smiled faintly. Yeah, you showed me around the house and told me all your secrets within an hour. Megan laughed. I could tell you needed a friend. She hesitated, then added, You've come a long way, Emma. I'm really proud of you. Emma's eyes filled with tears and she leaned her head against Megan's. I wouldn't have made it without you. The hours passed slowly, the weight of anticipation pressing down on everyone in the house. By the time midnight approached, Emma could barely keep her eyes open. But just as she was about to drift off, Ethan returned to the living room, his expression unreadable. They have him, he said, his voice cutting through the silence. Emma sat up straight, her heart pounding. What? They caught him at the docks, Ethan confirmed. He was trying to board a private yacht when the authorities moved in. For a moment, Emma couldn't breathe. Relief flooded through her. But it was mixed with disbelief. He's really in custody? Ethan nodded. It's over. Emma buried her face in her hands as tears streamed down her cheeks. Megan wrapped her arms around her, holding her tightly. You're safe now, Ethan said, sitting beside her. He can't hurt you anymore. Emma sobbed quietly. The weight of everything finally crashing down on her. Years of fear, pain, and hiding. It was all over. And for the first time, she believed it. Morning arrived quietly, with soft rays of sunlight peeking through the curtains of the safe house. The storm of the night before had passed, leaving behind a stillness that felt almost unnatural to Emma. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing even though the rest of the world seemed to have paused. Her father was in custody. The authorities had him. She should feel safe now, relieved, but instead her chest was heavy, as though she were waiting for the ground to shift beneath her again. A soft knock at the door made her sit up. Come in. Megan peeked her head in, a sleepy smile on her face. You've been up for a while, huh? Emma shrugged. Couldn't sleep? Megan walked in and sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed. I don't blame you. I probably wouldn't be able to either. She hesitated, then added, but you should at least try to eat something. Anne made waffles. Emma's stomach twisted at the thought of food, but she forced a smile. Okay, I'll be down soon. Megan grinned. I'll save you a seat. As Megan left the room, Emma swung her legs over the side of the bed and took a deep breath. She ran her fingers through her hair, trying to shake off the lingering fog of doubt. Today was supposed to be the first day of her freedom, but it felt like she didn't know what to do with it. What does life look like without fear? She wondered. The kitchen was warm and inviting, the smell of maple syrup and fresh coffee filling the air. Anne was flipping the last of the waffles onto a plate when Emma walked in. Ethan sat at the table, sipping his coffee and scrolling through his phone, while Megan was already halfway through her breakfast, happily drizzling extra syrup onto her plate. "Morning," Ethan said, his gaze softening when he saw her. "Morning," Emma replied, sliding into the seat beside Megan. Anne placed a plate of waffles in front of her, and though her appetite was nowhere to be found, she took a small bite out of politeness. "How are you feeling?" Ethan asked, setting his phone down. Emma hesitated. She didn't want to lie, but she wasn't sure how to explain the swirling mix of emotions inside her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I thought I'd feel different." Anne sat across from her, folding her hands on the table. "You've been carrying this for a long time. It's not something you let go of overnight." Emma traced the edge of her fork along the plate. "I keep waiting for something bad to happen. Like this is just another false sense of security, and any minute, it'll all come crashing down." Ethan reached across the table and gently took her hand. "It won't. I know it's hard to believe, but you don't have to keep looking over your shoulder. He's not coming back. And even if he tries, we'll be ready." Emma's throat tightened, but she nodded. I don't know who I am without the fear. It's been with me for so long." Megan set down her fork and looked at her seriously. "You're Emma. That's who you are. Not the girl who survived her father. You're more than that." Emma blinked back tears as she took in Megan's words. More than that. Was it possible to be something more than the fear and trauma that had shaped her life? Anne stood and placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "Today you rest. Don't pressure yourself to feel a certain way. Just take it one moment at a time." Emma exhaled shakily and gave a small smile. "Thanks, Anne." After breakfast, Emma found herself sitting on the porch swing with Megan, the gentle creak of the chains providing a soothing rhythm. The morning breeze rustled the trees, and the scent of salt from the nearby ocean lingered in the air. Megan stretched her legs out, leaning her head back against the swing. "So what's the first thing you want to do now that you're free?" Emma thought for a moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I don't know. I've spent so long running and hiding that I never really thought about what life could be like afterward." "Well, you've got time to figure it out," Megan said with a smile. "But if you want my advice, you should do something just for you, something that makes you happy." Emma considered that. It had been years since she had done anything purely for her own happiness. She had been too focused on survival. "Maybe I'll visit the beach," she said softly. "I used to love the ocean before." "Everything happened," Megan beamed. "The beach is perfect. We could go together." Emma smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through her chest. "I'd like that." Inside, Ethan sat in the living room, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke with the lead detective on the case. "What's the status on Evans?" "He's in custody," the detective replied. "He'll be transferred to a secure facility later today. We've got enough evidence to hold him without bail, but we'll need Emma's full testimony to close the case." "She's willing to do it," Ethan said, "but she's been through a lot. I don't want to push her too hard." The detective's tone softened. "Take your time. The case is solid, but her testimony will make it airtight." After ending the call, Ethan leaned back on the couch and exhaled. The weight of the past few days pressed heavily on him, but there was also relief. Richard Evans was finally where he belonged, and Emma had a chance to rebuild her life. Anne walked into the room, wiping her hands on a towel. "How's she doing?" "She's processing," Ethan replied, "but I think she's starting to see that she has a future." Anne smiled. "That's thanks to you. You gave her a chance when no one else did." Ethan shook his head. "She did the hard part. I just gave her a safe place to land." Anne sat beside him. "And sometimes that's exactly what people need." As the afternoon stretched on, Emma and Megan walked down the path leading to the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks below, their sound filling the air like a lullaby. Emma stood at the edge, her hair blowing in the breeze as she breathed in the salty air. For the first time in years, she felt like she could take a full breath without the weight of fear pressing down on her chest. "I used to come to places like this to think," Emma said, her voice soft. "The ocean always made me feel small, but in a good way. Like my problems weren't as big as they seemed." Megan nodded. "It's kind of magical, isn't it?" "Yeah," Emma whispered, closing her eyes. "It is." As the wind whipped around them, Emma felt a sense of release, like the waves were washing away the last remnants of her fear. She wasn't fully healed, she knew that. But standing there, with the ocean stretching endlessly before her, she realized something important. She didn't need to be fully healed to start living again. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt like it had truly begun. The morning air carried the crisp scent of pine and salt as Emma sat on the wooden porch of the safe house, her knees pulled to her chest. The dew on the grass sparkled like tiny diamonds, and the gentle hum of the wind in the trees was the only sound, broken occasionally by the distant calls of seagulls from the nearby cliffs. For the first time in days, the world didn't feel like it was closing in on her. The news of her father's arrest had reached every corner of the media, and the flood of headlines was beginning to settle. The storm that had been chasing her for years had passed, but what came next was uncharted territory. Ethan stepped outside, a cup of coffee in his hand. He walked over to the porch swing and sat down, the chains creaking softly beneath him. He didn't say anything at first, just sipped his coffee and looked out at the horizon. "You've been quiet this morning," he said finally, glancing at her. Emma shrugged, her fingers picking at the loose threads of her sweater. "I'm just thinking about what happens now." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "What do you want to happen?" "I don't know," Emma admitted. "I thought once my dad was arrested, everything would feel different, easier, but I still feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." Ethan nodded, understanding. "It's normal to feel that way. You've been living on edge for so long that your mind doesn't know how to relax yet. But it will. With time." Emma let out a soft sigh. "I don't even know where to start." Ethan smiled gently. "One step at a time. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just focus on what you want today to look like, and go from there." Emma considered his words. For so long, her days had been dictated by survival. Running, hiding, watching her back. The idea of choosing how to spend her day felt foreign but also exciting in a strange way. "Maybe I'll go to the beach," she said after a moment. Ethan's smile widened. "That sounds like a good start." The path to the beach was lined with wildflowers, their petals swaying gently in the breeze. Megan walked beside Emma, her flip-flops slapping against the dirt trail as they made their way toward the shoreline. The sun was warm on their backs, and the smell of salt water grew stronger with each step. When they reached the beach, Emma kicked off her shoes and let the cool sand sink between her toes. The waves lapped gently at the shore, their rhythm soothing and familiar. She closed her eyes, breathing in the ocean air and letting the sound of the waves wash over her. "I used to love the beach," Emma said, opening her eyes. "When I was little, my mom and I would build sandcastles for hours. She'd always let me win when we had sandcastle competitions." Megan grinned. "I'd love to see you build one now. You'd probably crush me in a competition." Emma laughed softly, the sound surprising even herself. "Maybe." They walked along the shoreline, their feet leaving temporary imprints in the wet sand. The sun glittered on the surface of the water, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Emma felt light. She didn't have to look over her shoulder or wonder who was following her. As they reached a large, flat rock near the water, Megan sat down and pulled out her sketchbook. "I'm going to draw this place," she said, her eyes scanning the landscape. "It feels like magic here." Emma sat beside her, watching as Megan's pencil moved effortlessly across the page. "It does feel magical," she admitted. Megan glanced at her, her expression thoughtful. "You seem different today, lighter." Emma smiled faintly. "I think I am. It's weird, but being here, away from everything, it feels like I'm finally allowed to breathe." Megan nodded, focusing on her sketch. "It's because you're not running anymore. You've got room to think about what you want instead of what you're afraid of. Emma tilted her head, absorbing Megan's words. Yeah, I think you're right. By the time they returned to the safe house, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Anne was in the kitchen preparing dinner, the smell of roasted chicken wafting through the house. Ethan sat at the table, going through some documents with a pen in hand. But he looked up and smiled when the girls walked in. "How was the beach?" he asked. "Perfect," Emma replied, setting her shoes by the door. "I think I needed that." Ethan motioned to the seat beside him. "Good. Sit down for a minute. I want to talk to you about something." Emma's pulse quickened slightly as she sat down. "What is it?" Ethan handed her a small folder. "I've been talking to a few people, and there are options for where you can go next. If you want to stay here for a while longer, you're welcome to. But if you're ready to start somewhere new, I can help you with that too." Emma opened the folder, her fingers brushing over the papers inside. There were details about different programs, counseling services, housing options, even college applications. The possibilities felt endless, but instead of overwhelming her, they gave her a sense of hope. "You've really thought about this," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Ethan smiled. "Of course, but it's your choice. There's no rush." Emma closed the folder and looked up at him. I want to stay here a little longer, at least until I figure out what comes next." Ethan nodded, his smile warm. "That sounds like a good plan." Anne placed a platter of roasted chicken and vegetables on the table, interrupting the moment. "Dinner's ready," she said cheerfully. Megan grabbed a plate and began piling it with food, and the rest of them followed suit. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and stories. For the first time in years, Emma didn't feel like she was trapped in the past. She was surrounded by people who cared about her, and for once, the future didn't seem so daunting. After dinner, as she helped Anne wash the dishes, Emma glanced out the window at the darkening sky. The stars were beginning to appear, twinkling faintly against the backdrop of twilight. "I think I'm going to be okay," Emma said softly. Anne smiled knowingly. "I think so too." And as Emma dried the last plate and placed it on the shelf, she realized that the fear she had carried for so long had begun to loosen its grip. The chains of her past were breaking, and she was finally ready to take her first steps toward something new. The next morning dawned with a soft, golden light seeping through the windows, casting warm patches across the floor of the safe house. But for Emma, the warmth couldn't reach the chill buried deep inside her. She stood by the window in the living room, staring out at the trees swaying gently in the breeze. The world seemed peaceful, almost too peaceful. She hadn't been able to sleep. Even after everything, after the arrest, the beach walk, and the supportive voices surrounding her, there was still a part of her that felt trapped in the past. The nightmares had come again last night, as they often did. She had woken up gasping for breath, the memory of her father's cold eyes etched into her mind. The waves pulling her under, his voice saying goodbye as he tossed her into the sea. She gripped the windowsill tightly, her knuckles turning white. When will this end? The sound of footsteps behind her made her flinch. She turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee. He had a way of showing up when she needed someone, without her ever having to ask. "Couldn't sleep again?" he asked gently, offering her the cup. Emma shook her head as she took it. The warmth of the ceramic mug felt grounding, but it wasn't enough to stop the racing thoughts in her head. "The nightmares won't go away," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan leaned against the wall, his gaze steady but full of understanding. "They will, eventually. But you've been through something traumatic, Emma. You can't expect it to disappear overnight." "I know," she said, taking a sip of the coffee. "But it's not just the nightmares. It's this wait. Like I'm still waiting for him to come back, even though I know he's behind bars." Ethan crossed the room and sat on the couch, motioning for her to join him. She hesitated, but eventually sat down, cradling the mug in her lap. "Have you thought about talking to someone?" Ethan asked. "A counselor?" "Maybe." Emma nodded slowly. I saw the information in the folder you gave me. I'm considering it. She exhaled deeply. I guess I'm scared that talking about it will make it feel real again. Ethan smiled faintly. It's already real, Emma. Talking about it won't change that, but it might help you process it. Emma stared into the coffee, watching the steam curl upward. I think the hardest part is knowing I can't confront him directly. There's so much I want to say to him, but I'll never get the chance. Ethan's brow furrowed. Why do you think that? She looked up, confusion flickering across her face. Because it's over. He's in jail. What would be the point? Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The point is closure. You've carried the weight of what he did for years, and if there's something you need to say, you shouldn't hold it inside. Emma's throat tightened. You think I should visit him? Only if you're ready, Ethan said. And only if it's what you want. But sometimes, facing the person who hurt you can take away their power. Emma considered his words, her mind racing. Part of her hated the idea of seeing her father again, of being in the same room as the man who had tried to kill her. But another part of her wanted to look him in the eye and let him know that she wasn't afraid of him anymore. I don't know if I'm ready, she whispered. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You don't have to decide today, but when you are, I'll be right there with you. The day passed slowly, with Emma spending most of it sitting on the porch swing, lost in thought. Megan joined her for a while, sketching quietly beside her, but she could tell that Emma's mind was elsewhere. By evening, Emma had made up her mind. She walked into the living room, where Ethan was reading through some documents, and took a deep breath. I want to do it. Ethan looked up, his expression serious. Are you sure? Emma nodded, her hands trembling slightly. I need to do this. I can't keep living with all these things left unsaid. Ethan stood and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Okay. I'll call the prison and make the arrangements. The next morning, they drove in silence toward the prison where Richard Evans was being held. The landscape blurred past the car window, but Emma barely noticed. Her mind was focused on the upcoming confrontation, rehearsing the words she wanted to say. When they arrived, Ethan parked the car and turned to her. You don't have to do this alone. I can go in with you. Emma shook her head. Thanks, but I need to do this by myself. Ethan nodded, understanding. I'll be waiting right here. She opened the door and stepped out, her legs feeling like they weighed a ton. The entrance to the prison loomed ahead of her, cold and imposing, but she forced herself to move forward. Inside, the process of being checked in felt surreal. Guards escorted her to a small visitation room, where a table and 2 chairs sat in the center. The walls were bare, and the air was cold enough to make her shiver. She sat down, her fingers nervously tapping the edge of the table as she waited. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure the guards could hear it. The door on the other side of the room opened, and Richard Evans walked in, escorted by 2 guards. He was wearing a standard prison jumpsuit, and the confident, polished businessman she had once feared seemed diminished. His hair was disheveled, and the dark circles under his eyes made him look older than she remembered. But when his eyes met hers, the coldness she knew all too well was still there. Emma swallowed hard as he sat down across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, Richard leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. I didn't think you'd have the nerve to face me. Emma's fingers stopped tapping, and she straightened her posture. I didn't come here to prove anything to you. His smirk faded slightly. Then why are you here? Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself. Because I need to say goodbye. I need you to know that you don't have power over me anymore. For years I was terrified of you. I let you control my life even when you weren't there. But not anymore. Richard's eyes narrowed. Do you really think you've won? I don't care about winning, Emma said firmly. I care about living, and I'm done living in fear of you. For the first time, Richard looked unsettled. His smirk was gone, replaced by something darker. But Emma didn't flinch. I came here to let you go, she continued. Whatever happens to you now is out of my hands, but I'm not carrying the weight of what you did anymore. It's yours to carry now." Richard leaned forward, his voice low. "You'll always be a part of this family. Emma, you can't escape that." Emma met his gaze, her voice steady. "I'm not escaping, I'm moving on." She stood, her hands no longer trembling. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the door, leaving her father behind for good. As she stepped outside into the sunlight, she took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the crisp, clean air. Ethan was waiting by the car, his eyes searching hers as she approached. "How do you feel?" he asked. Emma smiled faintly, the weight in her chest finally lifting. Lighter. And for the first time, she believed it. The drive back from the prison was quiet. But it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence that Emma had grown used to. This time, the quiet felt like space, room to breathe, to reflect, to let go. She stared out the window, watching the rolling hills and scattered trees pass by, the sunlight flickering through the branches like tiny beacons of hope. Ethan glanced at her from the driver's seat, his eyes flickering with concern. "You okay?" Emma nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I am. For the first time in forever, I think I actually am." Ethan relaxed slightly, keeping one hand on the wheel and the other resting comfortably on the armrest. "You were brave back there." Emma's fingers played with the edge of her jacket, but she didn't look away from the window. "I didn't feel brave at first. I felt terrified, but once I started talking, it was like I could finally see him for what he really is. He's just a man, flawed, broken, and desperate. He's not the monster I made him out to be in my head." Ethan smiled faintly. "That's an important realization. You took his power away." "I think I finally understand what you meant when you said facing him would help me," Emma said. "It wasn't about getting answers or closure. It was about letting him see that I'm not the same person he tried to destroy." Ethan's fingers drummed lightly on the steering wheel as he nodded. "Exactly. And now you get to move forward without him holding you back." The words "move forward" echoed in Emma's mind. For so long, the idea of the future had felt like an abstract concept, something distant and unattainable. But now, it felt real. Possible. "What do you think moving forward looks like for you?" Ethan asked after a moment. Emma hesitated, then smiled softly. "I'm not sure yet, but I know it doesn't involve looking over my shoulder anymore." When they returned to the safe house, Anne was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner, and the smell of garlic and onions filled the air. Megan sat at the kitchen table, drawing in her sketchbook, but the moment she saw Emma walk in, she dropped her pencil and rushed over. "How did it go?" Megan asked, her voice filled with a mix of curiosity and concern. Emma smiled, wrapping her arms around Megan in a warm hug. "It went better than I thought it would. I said what I needed to say." Megan pulled back slightly, her eyes searching Emma's face. "And how do you feel now?" "Lighter," Emma replied honestly. "Like I've been carrying a boulder for years, and now it's finally gone." Megan grinned, her relief evident. "I'm so proud of you." Anne wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked over to them. "You did something brave today." "Emma, don't forget that." Emma's chest warmed at their words, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like part of a family, a real family. As the evening wore on, they gathered around the dining table, the warm glow of the overhead lights casting a cozy ambiance. The meal was simple but delicious: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables. Conversation flowed easily, with Megan sharing stories about her art projects and Anne teasing Ethan about his terrible sense of direction. Emma found herself laughing freely, the sound genuine and unrestrained. The weight of the past no longer sat on her shoulders like a shadow. After dinner, Megan dragged Emma outside to the back patio, where the sky stretched endlessly above them, dotted with stars. The cool night air wrapped around them, but Emma didn't mind. The scent of pine mixed with the faint saltiness of the ocean, creating a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. "I brought this for you," Megan said, holding out her sketchbook. Emma raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "Just open it," Megan said, grinning. Emma flipped through the pages, her eyes widening as she saw the drawings. There were sketches of the beach they had visited, the cliffs, and even the safe house. But what caught her attention most was a drawing of the two of them sitting on the porch swing, laughing. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. "Megan, this is beautiful." Megan shrugged, though her cheeks flushed with pride. "I wanted you to have something to remind you of this place. You've been through so much, and I thought maybe this could be a reminder of how far you've come." Emma hugged her tightly, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you. This means more to me than you know." They sat on the porch swing for a while, the gentle creak of the chains blending with the sounds of the night. Emma leaned back, her eyes fixed on the stars above. For so long she had felt trapped by the past, but now the future stretched before her like the night sky, vast, open, and full of possibilities. Inside the house, Ethan and Anne sat in the living room, sipping tea as they discussed the next steps. "She's doing better," Anne said, her voice warm. "She is," Ethan agreed, setting his mug down on the coffee table. "But she's still figuring things out. It'll take time." Anne nodded. "She has you and Megan. That's a good foundation to build on." Ethan leaned back against the couch, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I've been thinking about that. I don't want her to feel like she has to leave if she's not ready. If she wants to stay, she's welcome to, for as long as she needs." Anne smiled. "That's what family does." As the night wore on and the house fell silent, Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The stars outside her window cast faint patterns across the walls, and the rhythmic sound of the waves in the distance lulled her into a sense of calm. She thought about her father, about the words she had spoken to him, and the way his power over her had finally broken. She wasn't naive. She knew the memories would still haunt her from time to time. But now, those memories no longer had the same hold on her. She was free, and for the first time as she drifted off to sleep, her dreams weren't filled with fear or drowning. They were filled with light. The morning sun spilled across the safe house in golden beams, casting soft light through the kitchen window as the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. The warmth of the new day wasn't just in the sunlight, it was in the atmosphere. Everything felt different, lighter, as though the house itself could sense that the weight Emma had been carrying was finally gone. Emma stood at the counter, pouring herself a cup of coffee. The steam curled upward, and for a moment, she just stood there, letting the aroma fill her senses. She had woken up without nightmares for the first time in months. Her dreams had been peaceful, filled with images of the beach, laughter, and the sound of waves instead of her father's voice pulling her under. Behind her, Megan shuffled into the kitchen, still wearing her pajamas, her hair a messy tangle. "You're up early," Megan said through a yawn. Emma smiled softly. Couldn't waste a morning like this. Megan grabbed a glass of orange juice and joined her at the table. "Big plans today?" Emma stared out the window, watching the trees sway gently in the breeze. For once, her plans didn't revolve around running or hiding or looking over her shoulder. Today felt like a blank canvas, waiting for her to decide how to fill it. "I was thinking about going back to the beach," Emma said. "But this time I want to go alone." Megan's eyes widened, but she smiled. "That's a big step." "Yeah," Emma agreed. "I think it's time." Ethan and Anne were sitting on the porch when Emma stepped outside, a small backpack slung over her shoulder. Ethan looked up from the newspaper he was reading and smiled. "Heading out?" Emma nodded. "Just to the beach. I want to take some time to think." Ethan stood and walked over to her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You've come a long way, Emma. I hope you know that." Emma's throat tightened, but she managed a smile. "I couldn't have done it without you." Ethan squeezed her shoulder gently. "You were always stronger than you thought. I'm just glad you're starting to see it too." Anne waved from the porch swing. "Take your time, sweetheart. We'll be here when you get back." With that, Emma set off down the familiar path, the dirt crunching softly beneath her feet as she made her way toward the cliffs. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of salt, reminding her of the ocean breeze that had comforted her the other day. This time, though, she wasn't walking toward the beach to escape anything. She was walking towards something new. When she reached the shore, the sun was high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the sand. The waves lapped gently at the shoreline, their rhythmic movement steady and soothing. Emma slipped off her shoes and stepped onto the cool sand, letting it sift between her toes as she walked along the water's edge. She stopped when she reached the large, flat rock where she and Megan had sat before. Sitting down, she pulled a journal from her backpack, its cover worn and familiar. She had started writing in it shortly after arriving at the safe house, filling its pages with memories, fears, and hopes for the future. But today, she didn't write about the past. She flipped to a blank page and started writing about what came next. I used to think the future was something I couldn't control. I thought my life would always be defined by what happened to me, by the fear I carried and the pain I couldn't let go of. But today, I'm choosing something different. Today, I'm choosing to live. She paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. I know there will still be hard days. I know the memories won't disappear overnight. But I'm not the same person I was when this all started. I've faced my fears. I've spoken my truth. And now, I'm free. A tear slid down her cheek, but this time it wasn't from sadness. It was relief. She wiped it away and smiled as she closed the journal. The waves crashed softly against the shore, and she leaned back, letting the warmth of the sun wash over her. For so long, she had been drowning in fear. But now she felt like she was floating, buoyant, weightless, free. As the afternoon wore on, Emma stayed by the water, letting her mind wander toward possibilities she had never allowed herself to consider before. College, travel, friendships, maybe even love. The future felt like an open road stretching endlessly before her, and for the first time she wasn't afraid to walk it. She stood, brushing the sand off her hands, and picked up her backpack. The wind tousled her hair as she turned back toward the path leading home. Home. The word felt right, like a warm embrace. The safe house had been more than just a refuge. It had been a place of healing, of rediscovery. And while she didn't know how long she would stay there, she knew that no matter where life took her, the people inside those walls would always be her family. When she returned, the smell of cookies baking greeted her at the door. Megan was sitting cross-legged on the couch, sketching while Anne bustled around the kitchen, humming softly to herself. Ethan was on the porch sipping a cup of tea and reading the same book he had been working through for days. Emma stood in the doorway, taking it all in. She didn't need to say anything. This was home and she was part of it. Megan looked up and smiled. "You're back. How was the beach?" Emma set down her backpack and joined her on the couch. It was perfect. Megan's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Did you write anything in your journal?" Emma nodded. "Yeah, a lot. Are you going to share it with me?" Emma laughed softly. "Maybe someday." Anne peeked her head around the corner. "Dinner will be ready soon. I'm making your favorite, spaghetti with garlic bread." Emma's heart swelled. "Thanks, Anne." Ethan walked in from the porch, setting his tea on the table. "Sounds like you had a good day." "I did," Emma said, meeting his gaze. "A really good day," Ethan smiled. "That's what we've been hoping for." As the evening unfolded, filled with laughter, the clinking of forks against plates, and Megan's playful teasing, Emma realized that this wasn't just the end of a long and painful chapter. It was the beginning of something new, something she was ready to embrace. After dinner, she sat on the porch swing with her journal open in her lap, watching the stars blink to life in the night sky. And as she wrote the final sentence for the day, she smiled to herself. "I don't know exactly where I'm going next, but for the first time, I'm excited to find out."